The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair, the X-Chair office chair. xchairthom.com is the website, xchairthom.com. Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beats. More information is available over at thomsbeats.com, thomsbeets.com, or by calling 800-568-9889. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Cameron Hughes scours the world looking for the finest wines. You can get more information about Cameron Hughes and his wines at chwine.com/Thom, Thom. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Legacy of Secrecy, The Long Shadow of the JFK Assassination by Lamar Waldron and me. The assassination of President John F. Kennedy on November 22, 1963, triggered cover-ups by officials, this is from the introduction, by the way, that continue to negatively impact American politics, life, and foreign policy. Legacy of Secrecy details those cover-ups and hidden investigations, many for the first time, including the reasons they were carried out under such intense secrecy. Most were spawned by John and Robert Kennedy's top-secret 1963 plan to stage a coup against Fidel Castro, a plan so highly classified that it only started to be exposed in 2005 and is finally revealed in this book. Their own confessions now show that three mafia bosses, Carlos Marcello, Santo Trafficante, and Johnny Roselli, were behind JFK's assassination. They used parts of the secret coup plan to kill JFK in a way that forced Attorney General Robert Kennedy, President Lyndon B. Johnson, excuse me, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, and high CIA official Richard Helms to withhold critical information not only from the public and the press, but also from each other and sometimes their own investigators. It's important to keep in mind that JFK was murdered just a year after the tense nuclear standoff during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The main goals of U.S. officials were to prevent a nuclear confrontation with the Soviets and to protect JFK's ally high up in the Cuban government, Commander Juan Almeida, head of the Cuban Army in 1963, still listed as Cuba's #3 official today. While U.S. leaders have managed to prevent a confrontation with Russia and preserve a critical ally in the Cuban government, this limited the investigation into JFK's murder, allowing the 3 mafia chiefs and their associates to remain free. As a result, the long shadow of secrecy surrounding both JFK's murder and the coup plan set the stage for the murder of Martin Luther King, ultimately driving 2 presidents from office and bringing about the murders of 5 congressional witnesses in the mid-1970s. Legacy of secrecy breaks excuse me, important new ground in key areas, detailing for the first time Louisiana Godfather Carlos Marcello's clear confession to ordering JFK's assassination. Marcello's criminal empire ranged from Dallas to Memphis, and previously secret files at the National Archives have shown that he made this confession in 1985 to an FBI informant ruled credible by a federal judge as part of a secret FBI undercover sting operation named Camtex. Exposed here for the first time, Camtex yielded Marcello's admission that he'd met Lee Harvey Oswald and set Jack Ruby up in business in Dallas. The operation also generated hundreds of hours of heretofore secret prison audio tapes of Marcello discussing his crimes, recorded using the FBI informant's bugged transistor radio. Yet the FBI and Justice Department withheld most of that information from the public and Congress for years until its revelation in this book. Carlos Marcello wasn't the only mob boss who confessed his involvement in JFK's murder to a trusted associate. Legacy also uncovers important new information about Marcello's partners in JFK's assassination, Tampa Godfather Santos Trafficante and Johnny Roselli, the Chicago Mafia's man in Las Vegas and Hollywood. Shortly before their deaths, both mobsters admitted their roles in JFK's murder to their attorneys. 2 of their associates with documented ties to the secret JFK Almeida coup plan likewise confessed. Using exclusive new information supported by FBI files apparently withheld from Congress, this book names 2 of the Georgia men who paid James Earl Ray to kill the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, white supremacist Joseph Miltier and Hugh R. Spake. Miltier, who had been involved in Marcello's murder of JFK, was part of a small clique of racists in Atlanta who used Marcello to broker the contract to murder Dr. King. We document James Earl Ray's ties to Marcello's heroin smuggling operation and long overlooked evidence in FBI files linking Ray to Marcello's associate, Johnny Roselli. Finally, this book explains why Ray, while fleeing to Canada the day after killing Dr. King in Memphis, made a 400-plus mile detour south to Atlanta, where he contacted Spake to get help from Miltier. In 1979, the last congressional committee to investigate the murders of JFK and Dr. King, the House Select Committee on Assassinations, concluded, quote, that Trafficante, like Marcello, had the motive, means, and opportunity to assassinate President Kennedy, end of quote from the congressional report. The HSCA had been created in the wake of Roselli's sensational murder, but the HSCA was unable to establish direct evidence of Marcello's complicity. And the same was true for Trafficante and Roselli, because the CIA, FBI, and other federal agencies withheld so many relevant files. The HSCA, headed by civil rights figure Louis Stokes, also concluded there was a likelihood of conspiracy in the assassination of Dr. King and that financial gain was James Earl Ray's primary motivation. But they were unable to determine who had paid Ray or how the conspiracy had worked because the FBI and other agencies had hid critical files. With the help of more than 24 associates of John and Robert Kennedy, backed up by thousands of recently released documents at the National Archives, many of which are quoted here for the first time, Legacy tells the full story denied to Congress and the American people. Legacy of
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. Louise and I are down here in Orlando for this 9-day workshop on neurolinguistic programming, which is turning out to be just absolutely mind-bogglingly fascinating, and I'll be telling you about that a little more as we go on through the day. But it is time, typically we do this on Wednesday, but I'm here on Thursday, and I believe Congressman Mark Pocan is too. Are you with us, sir? He's not in his chair yet? Not yet. Okay. Well, we're waiting for Congressman Mark Pocan to show up. But when he does, hopefully he didn't get dragged off for a vote or something. There's this wild hearing going on right now in the House of Representatives, but I believe it's all committee heads who are doing the hearing. And I was watching part of this thing this morning with the Peter Strzok, the what would you call him? The FBI agent, I guess. Who was having this affair with, I think her name was Lisa Page, and they were communicating, not using their FBI phones, but their private phones. But, the Republicans got a hold of these private communications, and, he clearly had some political opinions, and, boy, they're going after him on that. So we'll see where that goes. A couple of points that I'd like to share with you while we're waiting for Congressman Pocan to show up are that, and I assume, Sean, that you're calling them right now on their cell phone to make sure that everything's okay. Yeah, you might want to try and call in his cell phone and see what's going on. Just a couple things, just some observations that I think are really important for us all to pay attention to. Number one, if Donald Trump thinks that he is going to harm the economy of China by tariffs, and that he's got some incredible leverage to do that and all that sort of thing, he has another think coming. This, China has essentially done basically the exact same thing that the United States did back in the 19th century, and that is build their economy using the structure essentially of tariffs and promotion of domestic industries. These are phrases from Alexander Hamilton's 1793 report on the subject of manufacturers. They have used these systems, in our case it was Buy America provisions. In their case, the government can only buy from Chinese manufacturers. They subsidize industries until they're up and strong. They protect them with tariffs, things like that. They have reached the point, China has, and they were very much not there the month of November 1986, when I lived in China and studied acupuncture at the acupuncture hospital there. I was in Beijing, and there were no skyscrapers. There were virtually no cars. I mean, I stood in Tiananmen Square, which is in front of a 12-lane highway, and it was just a sea of black bicycles, and maybe once every 5 minutes, one car would go by. So they've gone from that in 1986 to being one of the most modern and well-developed countries in the world. So if Trump thinks that he's going to hurt China by simply, trashing them with tariffs, he's got another thing coming. They have reached the point where their own internal domestic market is large enough that they don't need us anymore. Now, it's, they can cause us pain, we can cause them pain. I'm all in favor of an America First trade policy. I'm reluctant to use that phrase, America First, simply because of its horrible racist connotations going back to World War II. But anyhow, just for the point. But I understand Congressman Pocan is now with us?
Yes. Sorry, Tom. Sorry I had to be a little detained.
That's quite all right. You're a member of Congress. Stuff comes up. I get it. We're so happy to have you. And I would add, you're going to be with us for the hour taking calls. It's our Middays with Mark here on Thursday. We're live Thursday. I'm in Orlando. You're in, I assume, Washington, D.C.
Yes.
And yes. And the Congressman Pocan's website, of course, is pocan.house.gov. He is the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, one of the largest, most active, and I think most important caucuses. Caucus is a group of people working together in the United States Congress. If you have calls for Congressman Pocan, 202-808-9925. He'll be with us for the hour taking your calls. And Congressman, just to kick this off, I'm curious your thoughts on what's going on right now in the world. Pick the topic that you think is most important.
Well, I think, the most interesting, I spent 13.5 hours in an appropriations hearing yesterday, so spent a lot of time following the president's activities with NATO, picking a new energized fight with Germany after he's picked a fight with Canada, and now he's going to meet his buddy in Russia. Yeah, it's a weird time, right? And watching what's going on, as you were just talking about with the tariffs, I would feel more comfortable if he actually had an overall coherent message about what he's trying to do with trade. Instead, he's kind of throwing tariffs out somewhat indiscriminately. And we're just at a time where, again, Donald Trump's lack of any international expertise is just showing over and over and over again. And, he seems to care more about the people who can either grant him trademarks or anything else for his own ventures than what he's doing for the country. So it's just, I am as perplexed probably as everyone who's listening with how he handles international relations.
Yeah, in fact, Louise and I took Dr. Richard Bandler, who's teaching this seminar that we're at, out to dinner a couple nights ago, and the Uber driver was like, hey, Trump, with those tariffs, he's going to bring jobs back to America, right? And we all sort of made the point that if I'm the owner of a factory in the United States that is thinking, hey, we're gonna put tariffs on Chinese-made products so that people in America will buy them from me, I'm not looking at a time horizon that ends in a year and a half or at the most at 5.5 years at the end of the Trump presidency. I'm looking at a time horizon that has to be at least 10 to 20 years before I make a $100 million investment in expanding my factory. And by not doing this through you guys, through Congress, putting these things into law, but instead by doing them by presidential fiat, there's no company in America that's going to say, hey, we're going to risk everything on this. And so, his instinct is right, but his execution is like a total bumble. It's
right.
Am I making sense?
Targeted tariffs can work, especially against countries that violate the rules. But this president seems to put them out via tweets. He puts them out against people who are following the rules that you'd normally have other things in place. So if you're going to do something with China, that's fine, because there are some valid issues we have with China. But then make sure you have some agreements with your allies to help make up for what you may be losing along the way. And none of that's happened. Instead, he's picking fights with our allies that we actually need because he has no overall strategy. I think the best example I heard someone say is it's like he's a chef with all the right ingredients in front of him, and he has no idea what proportion of anything to put inside. So, you can make a really great meal with what's in front of him, or you can make something that's unedible, and unfortunately, he's making something that's unedible.
And he's got a really sharp knife in his hand, and he's waving it around wildly, and we're all standing within 5 feet of him. It's the kind of damage that could be done by this. We're going to hit a hard break here in about 20 seconds, Congressman. We're doing, because I'm on the road, we're doing all hard breaks. So is there anything else that you'd like to point out?
I think that's been, one of the big things that's going on. Oh, there we go. We hit the break. No worries.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll come back. We've got a whole stack of calls here for you from all over the country, so we'll just flip this right into Middays with Mark as soon as we get back from this break. Congressman Mark Pocan, the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, one of the really good guys in Congress, with us, taking your calls. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan, M-A-R-K-P-O-C-A-N, Rep like in representative, Rep. Mark Pocan.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with more of your calls right after this. And welcome back. Let's see here. Jared in Downingtown, Pennsylvania. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello, Tom, and hello, Congressman Pocan. I'm calling to ask you very simply, can America's reputation around the world recover after this? because I just don't see any way, shape, or form we're ever going to be able to recover from this. I mean, our allies have basically, they've pretty much abandoned us at this point because of Trump's stupidity, his incompetence. He's isolated us from pretty much the world. I mean, North Korea has been a laughing stock of this administration. Kim Jong-un visited a potato farm when Mike Pompeo was there, and he was supposed to have a visit. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing having him as president, and I don't think there's any way we're going to recover from this, and we're just going to decline into irrelevancy. What's your thoughts?
Jared, I'll tell you what, I look at it, I try to find silver linings. In this case, I think it's a platinum lining. People don't hold people around the country or world do not hold the American people at fault. They're holding Donald Trump at fault, and they're able to discern that it's this guy who's going around clumsily banging into all the china in the china shop, and that it's not the American people. He does have a percent of people who go to his rallies who support his crazy efforts, but that's not where the vast majority of Americans are. And just remember, when Barack Obama was elected, we were at a low point internationally, and he helped restore that, and we can do that again with maybe a Democratic Congress and Senate, or for sure a president in 2020. So I'm optimistic that, again, people understand this is Donald Trump, not America, and I think we can rebound. It's just we've got a lot of repairing that we're going to have to do because of this president.
Marie, there we go. Marie in Pipe Creek, Texas. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Oh, hi, Congressman Pocan. Nice talking to you.
Same here.
I had a question, and I don't know if anybody has mentioned this, but with the Supreme Court, don't you think it's about time that we should change the Supreme Court? I think adding a few more people to the Supreme Court, having 50% male, 50% female, and actually having 2 or 3 of the Supreme Court members actually elected by the people, one man, one vote. And I just wanted to see if anybody, isn't it about time? I mean, the Supreme Court.
Let's get his thoughts right now. We've only got about 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think there have been people talking about proposals. I think, the example that Mitch McConnell did by abusing the process for approval when Barack Obama should have had an appointment. And now if it turns out that, we're appointing someone because they won't go after the president, because that's the only person who is being looked at who said you shouldn't go after a president while they're there. If it gets abused so far, I think clearly you're going to have more people talk about Supreme Court reform, and rightfully so.
Yeah. Although I'm not sure I'd want to add more justices while Mr. Trump is president, but that's...
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm guessing you would share that opinion. We'll be right back. It's Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for our Middays with Mark Thursday edition here on the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be right back. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair, the X-Chair office chair. XChairTom.com is the website, XChairTHOM.com. Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. More information is available over at tomsbeets.com, THOMSBEETS.com, or by calling 800-568-9889. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Cameron Hughes scours the world looking for the finest wines. You can get more information about Cameron Hughes and his wines at chwine.com/Tom, THOM.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
On the line with us, taking your calls. And let's see here, Caroline in Charlottesville, Virginia. Caroline, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan. Or Carolyn? I'm sorry, you have to be listening to your telephone, not your radio or app or TV or whatever it may be. Russ in Chicago. Hey, Russ, because there's a time delay. Russ in Chicago, listening on Chicago's Progressive Talk. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
I wanted to ask you a question. Did I hear right that 56 of your dairy farmers have had to close because of the tariffs, and a guy in California is going to lose his job? And they're cheering Trump on, saying he's strong on tariffs. Did I hear that right out of Wisconsin, that 56 of your places are closing?
Couldn't tell you the exact number, but we've had now for several weeks, we've had companies saying that they're losing contracts because of the tariffs. So in Wisconsin, it's not just dairy, it's also soybeans, and we have a lot of, especially in my district, soybean production. It's also companies like Harley Davidson. Again, if this was done properly, you can have targeted tariffs be very effective tools. Donald Trump isn't doing it properly. He's just throwing these things out with no real policy, and that's what's making it completely not work. So he's basically taking, again, the right ingredients, but throwing them together completely wrong, and that's why what he's put together has been a real mess.
Brent in Columbus, Ohio. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you, Tom. Congressman, I'm a former local union president for United Steelworkers. And so my question is, I have a lot of friends who actually supported the president, and I'm trying to explain in nuance why some of his policies that we have sort of maybe not done a great job explaining, things like our position on NAFTA or TPP or tariffs, and how those things could help our industry. Now he's doing them, and as you just said, kind of throwing them together, not great. Is there some way that I could use a nuanced argument that I'm failing at that from your perspective? Is it you understand the nature of the question?
Yeah, no, I do. And in fact, yeah, very much so, because I grew up in Kenosha, Wisconsin, a town that 14,000 people used to make cars, and no one does today. I understand deindustrialization, and Donald Trump won Wisconsin, Michigan, and probably Pennsylvania because of his top-line conversations about trade. There's real economic anxiety with people who've seen a lot of jobs leave the USA and not have something that pays as well to pick up in that. The problem is, while Donald Trump said the right things, he did it for all the wrong reasons, right? He talked about trade from a xenophobic sort of background. He's going to do it in a way that benefits his buddies because he is of that billionaire class of people, and it's not done with middle-class workers in mind, because if it was, he wouldn't be doing things that are affecting jobs at Harley, or he wouldn't be doing some of the other measures that he's doing around trade or economics. He wouldn't give tax breaks to the wealthiest in this country at the expense of the middle class. So I think you got to look at his actions rather than his words, and his actions have benefited the top 1% and 2% of this country, and not everyone else. And while the Democrats may not always have been especially articulate around trade, we do get that it's about how we empower the middle class and make sure that they have health care and a good family-supporting wage, and those issues that are at the core of what we're running on, and that's not what Donald Trump runs on.
And I noticed that his daughter's products made in China are specifically exempted from the tariffs,
or generally broadly. And Donald Trump's own products, right? For all the hyperbole around Harley Davidson, a pretty iconic American product, here, he does his own products overseas. This man is a hypocrite, and he doesn't understand what he's doing.
Devin in Chesapeake, Virginia. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan. You have about a minute and a half, Devin, so please make it quick.
Yes. Is it possible that Donald Trump could be a Manchurian candidate, recruited and trained and by the Russians, and hence what he's doing is inevitable?
Devin, I wish it were as simple as that. I don't think it is. I think Donald Trump cares about something very deeply, and that subject is Donald Trump. And he cares about his wealth and his family and making money, and much of the actions we've seen he's done have been in the interest of his family, business operations, and he himself personally. So if there's a Manchurian candidate, I doubt that. It would be nice if you thought there was a reason like that he does what he does. The problem is this is a very selfish, a very narcissistic individual who does things for his own personal profits, and he does it for his own personal ego. And that really is, unfortunately, as simple as it is, and yet he somehow became president.
Well, he had Michael Cohen negotiating a Trump hotel in Moscow 3 months before the election. I mean, that would kind of indicate that might have a lot to do with why he's sucking up to Russia. Maybe he still wants to have the hotel.
And in China, I mean, as he was doing negotiations, he's getting trademarks for their products, for their family products. I mean, clearly, Donald Trump does much that's in the interest of Donald Trump.
Yeah, and tragically, just before or during the primaries, I guess, he made the joke, I think I'll be the first guy to ever run for president and make money on it. Whew, it's happening. Yeah. Congressman Mark Pocan with us for the hour, taking your calls. We're hitting the news break here at the bottom of the hour. We'll be back in about 5 minutes with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan. You can check out his website at pocan.house.gov. He's the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. You can Google that. And you can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan.
To the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
More of your calls for Congressman Pocan right after this. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Seize the Time, the story of the Black Panther Party and Huey P. Newton by Bobby Seale. This is from page 85, a subchapter titled Huey Backs the Pigs Down. And there are a few words in here that I'll be filling in, as it were. They're walking, he says, one day as we were walking out of the office, I guess we'd been there about a month or so, a pig passed by. He saw us coming out of the office with shotguns and pistols on our sides. About 6 or 7 of us came out of the office there in the daytime, and we looked at the pig as he passed by, and he jumped on his radio because he saw us coming out of the office with these pieces and stuff. We had just finished field stripping weapons, learning about 00 buckshot, learning about the 9mm and the .45, and having a political education session. We had a .45 and a .357 Magnum in the group and a couple of M1s. We had 3 or 4 shotguns by then. We bought up guns like a son of a bitch then. The pig went down 2 blocks and turned around, came back up the other side of the street. They were building rapid transit, BART, right down from Grove Street there, and we went up the other side of the boulevard and came back. We readily assessed that the pigs were ready to see what the F was happening, that this pig had radioed in, and he was running it down, how he had, quote, seen some N-words come out of a place here with some guns and blop, blop, de bloop, etc., come out of this office with guns and stuff. He was radioing into other pigs to help get them. Huey had his father's car that day, and he goes through that whole thing. So anyhow, the police pull him over, and Huey got in the car, and the pig came up to the window. You have any driver's license? So Huey rolled the window down. That wasn't more than a 3 or 4 inch crack in the window. Huey handed his license out the window. Is this your true name, the pig said? And Huey said, yes, that's my true name, Huey P. Newton. Is this your true address, 841 47th Street? And Huey said, yep, that's my true address, 841 47th Street. And what are you doing with the guns? And Huey said, what are you doing with your gun? This particular pig decided he wasn't going to argue, so he went back and got his little writing pad there where they fill out S-word. Your true name is Huey P. Newton? Huey said, that's right. The pig wrote it down. Your true address is 841 47th Street? Huey said, that's right. The pig then looked at his license. What's your phone number? And Huey said, 5, and stopped and wouldn't say anything else. And the pig said, 5 what? And this is when all the S-word between the pig and the party and the pigs began. Huey said, the Fifth Amendment. You ever heard of it? Don't you know about the constitutional right of a person not to testify against himself? 5, I don't have to give you anything but my identification, name, and address, so therefore I don't even want to talk to you. You can leave my car and leave me alone. I don't even want to hear you. What do you mean, the pig said. And Huey said, just what I said. The constitutional right of any man is that he doesn't have to testify against himself. And Huey had a big M1 sitting to his right with his hand on it. I had this 9mm sitting beside me, and Huey had this M1 at his side. Huey was driving. 4 other brothers were in the back seat. One of them was Bobby Hutton. They were being quiet because Huey told them to be quiet. And the pig is going crazy. He's by himself, and Huey's got all these black N-words in the car going for the MFer. Meanwhile, while the pig is trying to get bad, 3 cars drove up behind us, and one in the front. Some more were in the driveway. Blop, blop, blop de blue. Then another car came in front of us. A pig jumped out of the car, walked up to our car, and said through the crack in the window with a hoggish voice trying to sound intimidating, "What's going on here?" And Huey said, "The same basic procedures that are supposed to go on." Huey rolled the window down another 5 or 6 inches. The pigs were looking at the guns in the car. "Can I see that pistol there?" one of the pigs said. "No, you can't see it," Huey told him. I was beginning to get skeptical about what was happening because he pointed to my 9mm pistol. Huey was on probation, and if they thought that this was Huey's pistol, I didn't know this law stuff the way Huey knew it, so I moved the pistol over beside me real close. It had been lying in the middle of the seat. I said, "No, you can't see it." Huey said, "No, you can't see the pistol, nor this," pointing to his rifle. "And you don't want to look, and I don't want you to look at it. You don't have to look at it." "Is that your pistol?" he asked Huey. And I said, "No, it's not his pistol, it's my pistol." I said that because I was thinking the man's going to jump on Huey because he already told me about the probation law. If he gets caught with a pistol, he's burned. But if he gets caught with a rifle, the man can't mess with him because his probation officer told him he can carry a rifle or shotgun, and he couldn't stop him. The pig said, "Can I see it or not?" So Huey said to me, "I'll talk." And then he said to the pig, "No, you can't see the pistol. Get away from the car. We don't want you around the car, and that's all there is to it." "Well, I can ask him if I can see his pistol or not," the pig says. So I says, "Well, you can't see my pistol." The MFers tried to get indignant. They were blabbing and oinking to each other about who in the hell we thought we were, and Constitution my ass, they're just turning it around. Then the pig said to Huey, "Who the hell do you think you are?" "Look, damn it," Huey said. He opened the car door. This is where Huey got mad. I mean, you have to imagine this N-word. He got mad because these dogs were going to carry on, and they were bracing up like they were bad. Huey didn't go for this at all. Huey got very mad. He opened up the door saying, "Who the hell do you think you are?" In the first place, this man, pointing at the pig, came up here and asked me for my license like he was citing me for a ticket or observation of some kind. This police officer is supposed to be carrying out his duty, and here you come talking about our guns? Huey put his hand around his M1 rifle and continued, "We have a constitutional right to carry the guns, and anyway, I don't want to hear it." The pigs backed up a couple of steps, and Huey was coming out of the car. Huey had his hand back in the car getting his M1. And you know, if you've ever seen Huey, he gets growly but articulate. He came out of the car with his M1. Huey knows this law so well that he wouldn't have had the one M1 loaded inside the car. So he came out of the car. He dropped around into the chamber right away. Clack, clop. "Who do you think you all are anyway?" Huey said to the pigs. And the pigs were all on the sidewalk harassing all the brothers and sisters who gathered around. "You move on down the street," said the pig. Huey started interrupting. "You don't have to move down the street. Don't go anywhere. These pigs can't keep you from observing. You have a right to observe an officer carrying out his duty." And these pigs, they listened to all this S-word, and it goes on from there. It's a great story. Seize the Time by Bobby Seale. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you live from Orlando, where we're attending a seminar. It's purenlp.com if you want to check it out. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us. He is, well, you know all this stuff. Congressman, you're still with us, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. I don't have a monitor here. I can't see what's going on.
Oh, so, I am here. Yeah, no worries.
Let's pick up some more phone calls here. This is a trucker in Knoxville, Tennessee. Oh, Trucker Sam. Hey, Sam, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you. Greetings.
Hi, Sam.
Congressman, why is no one investigating who is making money off of separating these children from their parents down on the border? Because somebody's making
and one of these companies is charging $700 a day to hold these children, and Betsy DeVos is a stockholder in the company. What's going on with this, Congress?
Oh, yeah, and there have been some articles starting to show the connections, the donations from one of the major firms in Texas that's running these. I'm not necessarily thinking that they're doing this to empower the firms, because I think Donald Trump is doing this to get cheers at his rallies when he talks about the need for a wall, right? He is doing all of these things to try to rally that xenophobic part of his base, the racist part of his base. But the companies that are doing this, because, again, he had no plan when he made these decrees. And what we saw this week is he's had a fraction of the children he was court-ordered to reunite. He has reunited. He's mishandling this because there was no plan when he put it together. I think if this was done purely to give money to a company, there would have been a better plan of attack. And instead, this is done because Donald Trump operates like Donald Trump operates. He just makes a decree and then thinks he's doing what's best regardless of anyone else, because Donald Trump. So I certainly am having concerns with what's there. We're going to see more if there is anything that leads to it. But I truly believe he did this just because he's Donald Trump. He makes a decree. He thinks he's right on something. And I could see when I was at the border, this has been done with no planning whatsoever. That's why it's been chaotic. That's why we can't find kids and their parents to reunite. And that's why it's been such a terrible, terrible mess.
Charles in Opelika, Florida. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, how you doing today, Mr. Pocan?
Very good, Charles. Thank you.
Okay, I'm looking at these hearings right now, and I'm thinking, wait, first of all, you have Donald Trump and these Republicans and the administration trying to force Rob Rosenstein, I think, the FBI guy, to release information about an ongoing investigation about Russian conspiracy. And right now, you have Bob Goodlatte actually saying to the Democrats, no, that they should not release, because of ongoing investigation that they're doing, that you should not release transcripts of Peter Strzok's first closed door meeting with the committee. And I just see that this is just like, they're full of it. But my question to you is this: are you going to hold any town hall meetings on trying to stop this Supreme Court pick? Because to me, Mitch McConnell made up a rule, and he's going against it just for partisan reasons. They're trying to take over. And I would like to know if you're going to be willing to put your constituents out there and let them air, their worries, and hopefully we can get this on the news too.
Yeah, so Charles, as you know, the Senate does the confirmation of the Supreme Court. So I'm hoping that senators will do exactly what you're saying, because I think if people get a chance to be heard, as we know, right now the people are very energized and watching what's going on in this country. And when you see a pick that appears to be the sole reason why this person was selected to be in the Supreme Court is because they're the one person who said you shouldn't go after a president while they're sitting as a president, certainly is a parallel to what's going on right now. And Donald Trump cares about one thing and one thing only, and that's Donald Trump. So we would love to have people's voices heard, and that's what senators should be following. So I certainly hope that's what they'll do. People should reach out to their senators on this to make sure that they're heard. But I know that there are a lot of pressures we're reading about because of the election coming up. And I can also tell you from doing some programs recently on Fox, as I listen to people in the green room, they're excited because they know their base has not been motivated, and they think they could motivate the base around abortion and a Supreme Court pick. So, they may try to use this in very, very political ways because they've had an uninspired base up to this point because of Donald Trump. So there's a lot going on, but the best thing we can do is reach out to our senators and make sure they know what we think.
Stephen in Santa Fe, New Mexico, listening on 1260 AM. Stephen, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan. Stephen? Once again, you got to listen to your telephone, not your radio, because there is a delay. It takes time for electrons to move around. Plus, there's an obscenity delay, so if somebody says a bad word, we can push the button and it goes away. Ken in so call back, Stephen. There's at least one empty line right now. Ken in Great Falls, Montana. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. It's a question about immigration. One of the big problems we have is there are 8 million people who are illegally working in this nation. Now, that means there's probably about 200,000 to 300,000 illegal employers. I would like to see the Democrats have a zero-tolerance program for illegal employers. And let's put that ball in the court, because it's really a travesty to have these illegal people working because they have no rights. They don't call OSHA when there's problems. They're always in fear. And the Chamber of Commerce loves this. The manufacturers love this. These are the kind of employees they want. We need to get all these people documented. But if we started putting these employers in prison and giant fines, let's put it in their court.
Yeah, Ken,
Can we separate employers from their families?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Ken. And, I don't expect Paul Ryan to do that, right? Because, as you said, a lot of folks with the U.S. Chamber and others like it just the way it is, right? They've got people that can't report abuses or overtime law violations or a whole lot of other things. what I hope all of this is doing, and I think the separation of children from families has been the catalyst to make us look at just how cruel and inhumane and un-American the system we have right now, and Congress not doing anything about this since I've been here. This is my 6th year. And that first session, a bipartisan bill came out of the Senate. Not perfect, but it had some extra protection at the borders, but more importantly, it also had a pathway to citizenship for aspiring Americans and actually dealing with the problem that we all know is existing in this country. And the House of Representatives under Republican leadership didn't take it up. You know, maybe what we need to do is actually have that comprehensive immigration reform debate. And now people are seeing what happens when you don't. You can have a president who uses, agencies as his own police forces, deportation forces, going after people with, traffic violations, going after people with decade-old minor offenses in order to gin up numbers for a wall rather than dealing with the issue as we need to, that there are millions and millions of people who are currently here, and we need to figure the system out, and doing nothing is unacceptable. So I'm hopeful that the catalyst really has been Donald Trump being so perversely wrong by separating kids from their parents that now people who don't normally think about this are woken up to the issue. And now let's have that real debate, because I think American people get that this is a nation of immigrants and we've got to have a solution and not let it linger.
Courtney in Ukiah, Courtney in Ukiah, California. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking us on the road with you. And hi, Congressman. I just wanted to get your thoughts on, I'm listening to everybody's concern over the new Supreme Court appointee in Roe versus Wade. And, I mean, that's understandable, of course, but
Go ahead, Courtney. Courtney, we're still listening, unless your phone just faded out.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. You want to finish your sentence? Real quick. We're just a minute and a half away from a break.
Okay. So Roe versus Wade is nothing more than set legal precedent. I mean, so what would stop us when we take back the House and the Senate come November, Democrats? Why can't we pass a federal law protecting abortion rights? Yeah, I understand that it may be touchy with, states' rights versus federal authority, but it seems like something should be able to be done on that.
Let's let Congressman Pocan.
Sure, and I think from what I've seen, most of the hypothesization is if the court decides to go after this, which is going to have a little bit of lead time, it'll be more going after aspects of abortion rather than going directly immediately after Roe versus Wade. So you're right. There are many things we can do. What we don't want to do is have a patchwork of laws across the country. And the best way we can resolve this is to really deal with the Supreme Court up front and directly. But you're right. There are many other ways I think they're going to come and attack this as a Supreme Court that we have to be ready for and be ready to legislate around.
I saw where one of the, we're just a little more than 30 seconds away from a break here. I saw where one of the governors, and I'm sorry I don't remember which one it was, I've been reading so many news stories on this stuff lately, just came out and said that if the court strikes down Roe, that state has a law, a 160-year-old law, making abortion illegal under all circumstances and in all places, which has been unenforceable since 1973 because of Roe, and so they never bothered to take it off the books. If the court strikes that down in that particular state, abortion becomes illegal. That governor said that they would refuse to enforce the law. Do you foresee that kind of thing?
Yeah, already I've seen even candidates say that would happen in their state if they would get elected. Yeah, there you go. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. It's Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan right after this.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
You can check out Congressman Pocan's website at pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep Mark Pocan. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair. The X-Chair chair, office chair. xchairtom.com is the website, xchairthom.com. Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. More information is available over at thomsbeets.com, THOMSBEETS.com, or by calling 800-5.
Not only truly amazing, but extremely scary that way too many of your Republican comrades do not appear to care about our republic or our democracy. And they don't care about how Donald Trump came, if it was done with Russian interference, and Mr. Trump was actually involved in that interference. And so I have this question, but I have to ask it. Because if I'm upset about anything, I don't believe that another 40 years we will have a country, a republic, or a democracy. And I want to know, can we hold members of Congress who are doing everything they can to protect Trump responsible besides voting him out? Can we charge a member of Congress with treason? And can a representative be charged for abrogating their responsibility in protecting and not protecting the U.S. Constitution?
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, yes, you can, charge someone with treason if they do something, but I don't think you're going to find it from what actions you're seeing at the hearing. I think what we're doing is the best way you affect people in Congress that are letting the president do what he's doing in this situation is you change the faces of those people who are in Congress. That is your most direct way to deal with this. To try to charge someone with treason and go through all that, trust me, far, far, far more complicated and less likely it would ever happen. You getting people out to vote in November and voting out people who are complicit with the president's actions, far more doable, and that's where we really have to have people focus.
Yeah. We have a little more than, we have a minute and a half here. Omar in Herndon, Virginia. We got a minute to the break. Omar, quick question for the congressman?
Yes, very quick. Greeting to everybody. The Trump administration denying bail to a lot of these detainees because that's a way to prevent them from uniting with their families. Are we doing anything to make sure that they all receive bail? Is Congress doing anything?
I'm sorry, did you do anything too? I missed that part.
All of the detainees that are being detained, the migrant who crossed the border, they're being detained and they're being denied bail. I mean, the government is not allowing them to get bail so they can go now with their families, because you have to be able to get out to be able to get united with your family.
Right.
So is Congress doing anything to make sure that they all get bail?
Yeah, this Congress won't under Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell, but that's part of what we're trying to highlight, right? He claims he fixed taking kids away from their parents, but now you can lock up a 5-year-old with their mother in a cage as long as they're with their mother. That still doesn't solve the problem. And it's all started from him not letting people go to a legal point of entry and claim asylum like international law says. So there are many things that we're trying to highlight. The good news is the public is getting it, and we're winning at this.
We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Mark Pocan right after this. He's the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, represents the state of Wisconsin, and his Twitter handle, Rep. Mark Pocan. You can check out his website at pocan.house.gov. We'll be right back. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by XChair, the XChair chair, office chair. xchairtom.com is the website, xchairthom.com. Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. More information is available over at thomsbeets.com, THOMSBEETS.com, or by calling 800-568-9889. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Cameron Hughes scours the world looking for the finest wines. You can get more information about Cameron Hughes and his wines at chwine.com. facebook.com/Tom, Thom.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is Mark Pocan taking your calls. And let's see here. Dee in Seattle, Washington. Hey, Dee, thanks for listening. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, thank you. I had a similar question in reference to the trader. It's like I disagree with your comments because if let's say a doctor had an intention of killing the patient, and you're saying, well, we'll have to go through a process to get him relieved of his duties. By that time, the patient is dead, and that's America. What?
Well, Dee, your question presupposes that Trump is trying to destroy America. I can't buy that. Congressman, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think if I understand what Dee's asking, which I'm not sure exactly if I do, but what I was saying, if you want to do charges of treason, you can, but that process, I don't even know if it's possible that it would happen. It's more likely that you're going to unelect someone in a few months in November. So if you want to be pragmatic about how to stop it, you get rid of the people who are doing those actions. So I'm really giving you the shortest, easiest path on how to accomplish that, not saying that there's not other paths. None of them are going to be as efficient or effective as electing them out of office in November.
In other words, vote. DJ in Chicago. Hey, DJ, you're on the air with Congressman.
Hi, thank you. I'm thinking of these big guys, because the machine comes with such power. But people need to keep in focus, please, that it's a worldwide, nationwide governmental, such a disastrous government. And the only way to fight it.
So, DJ, what's your question for Congressman Pocan?
Well, first of all, the war should be on global warming, World War III. And number two is when are the...
Okay, DJ, what's your question?
What?
Okay, I'm going to move along and pick up a question here. Justin in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Hey, Justin, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Tom, Congressman Pocan. I have a couple of representatives down around my area. Basically, they do nothing. And I'm getting tired of having to come to them and talk to them and them always ask me for answers, and when I come up with the answers, they say, no, that's not right, and that sort of stuff. They don't move towards anything. Is there any way we can call them out as, quote-unquote, like welfare representatives, because they choose to do nothing whatsoever, but they expect to get paid? I mean, that's my local representative and state and that sort of stuff, but I'm trying to move for different stuff. I'm wondering your point of view.
Yeah, Justin, the problem is there's going to be people who maybe don't agree with you, and their way of handling it is not to do anything, or they may not do much in office. And, again, the best way to deal with that is through the electoral process. There's not a lot of other processes. Even in Wisconsin, when we tried a recall process on Scott Walker, it still was a recall process that went to an election. The more direct path to anything is run against people who aren't doing their jobs, vote against people who aren't doing their jobs. But elections matter. Elections have consequences, and what we've learned from this, with Donald Trump getting elected and Republican majorities in the House and Senate, is now you see the hearing that you have going on today. You see the separation of children and families at the border. You watch our international position falling apart because of tariffs, because of disrespect of allies, because of embracing leaders of like North Korea and Russia. But all those consequences come from elections. So I know I'm repeating it, but I repeat it for a reason. That is the simplest and best way that you can grab control of our democracy, is by being an active participant.
That's what it means to live in a republic. Dave in Evansville, Wisconsin. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan. Please keep it quick. I think we just have about a minute and a half 2 minutes to the end of the end of the hour.
Actually, okay, then can I stay on until after he's gone? Can I just say, Mark?
No, I'm not going to be taking calls. Dave, I'm sorry, Anthony in upstate New York. Quick one for Congressman Pocan.
Hey, Congressman, I'll make it really, really quick. There's 3 people from Wisconsin separated from their families. Unfortunately, they were separated into coffins by illegal driving drunk. Plus, I could give you, if I had time, names of dozens of others who are separated from their families because of the actions of people here illegally. Are they just a casualty of the process, or how do we protect Americans and not just using ripping from families a term for people here illegally? I'd like to protect keeping families together in life of our own citizens first.
Sure, and you know what? In Wisconsin, there's more than 3 people that were killed by drunk drivers, I can assure you, in a very short amount of time, and it's not just because someone is not here on a legal basis. I know that certain people like to use those examples as a reason to why we need immigration reform, i.e. a wall, i.e. people who don't have darker color skin than themselves. But it's used in an extremely distorted way. Bottom line is, there actually are lower evidences statistically of crime by people who are here in this country who are not citizens because they're quite honestly being far more careful when they're here than not. So let's not fall for that conservative rhetoric, and let's realize that when you separate a kid from a mother who've come here to a legal entry point to claim asylum, which is legal under international law because of violence in countries that, quite honestly, we've exported the MS-13 gang members to El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, and they're here for legal asylum reasons. They should be heard for legal asylum reasons and not treated like they aren't humans. That's the bottom line, and that goes beyond any rhetoric that's put out there by conservatives.
Congressman, thanks so much for being with us today. It's always great talking with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tom. Take care.
And we'll be back. John Laval is going to be with us. We talked about this on Tuesday. We're at this seminar on neurolinguistic programming. He is a master trainer of NLP and design human engineering and the president of the Society of NLP. So we're going to take about a half-hour pause here and talk about that.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by XChair, the XChair office chair. XChairTom.com is the website, XChairTHOM.com. Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by SuperBeats. More information is available over at tomsbeats.com, THOMSBEETS.com, or by calling 800-568-9889. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Cameron Hughes scours the world looking for the finest wines. You can get more information about Cameron Hughes and his wines at chwine.com/Tom, THOM. For our book club today, we're reading from Thomas Frank's book, Rendezvous with Oblivion, Reports from a Sinking Society. This is chapter 1, titled Servile Disobedience. Social scientists have tried for more than a century to understand how class works. Psychological experiments on the subject, however, are a relatively novel thing, so I was surprised to discover a few years ago that psychologists had published a series of papers on the behavioral aspects of social status, and that their findings were almost uniformly unflattering towards society's winners. In one 2009 study in Psychological Science found that in conversations with strangers, high-status people tend to do more doodling and fidgeting, and also to use fewer engagement cues, looking at the other person, laughing, nodding their heads. A 2010 paper published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that lower-class individuals, in quote, turned out to be better performers on measures of such pro-social virtues as generosity, charity, and helpfulness. A third study found that those of higher status were noticeably worse at assessing the emotions of others or figuring out what facial expressions mean. All of which is to say the rich are different from you and me. They are more rude and less generous. They don't understand, they don't get what others are thinking, and apparently they don't really care. Perhaps this is obvious to you. After all, people don't design toxic debt obligations by calling out what they learned in Sunday school. Still, the research aroused media interest. The Christian Science Monitor's 2010 account of one study ended with this quotation from Michael Krauss, then the University of California, San Francisco, who is one of the researchers, quote, "Being empathic is one of the first steps to helping other people. One of the first things we're really interested in is what can make wealthy people, affluent people, the people with the capacity to give, what can make them empathic?" I think I see the urgency of Dr. Krauss's question. After all, we have spent the past several decades doing everything we could to transfer the wealth of the nation into the bank accounts of the affluent to send them victorious, happy, and glorious long to reign after us, over us. Oh, we've cut their taxes, gladly transferring much of the cost of keeping their property safe onto our own shoulders. We've furnished them with special megaphones so that their voices can be heard over the hubbub of the crowd. We've conferred upon them separate and better schools, their very own transportation system, and a full complement of private security guards. We've built an entire culture of courtiers and sycophants to make their every working hour an otherworldly delight. We let them construct a system of bonuses and executive compensation on the theory that it would be good for everyone if the people at the top got to take home much, much more than the rest of us. And when it turned out that the theory was wrong, that in the most famous cases, executives chased bonuses not to the shareholders' benefit, but at their expense, why, we promptly bailed them out. We allowed them to step into the Fed's discount window and fill their pockets. We generously transferred their reckless investments to our balance sheet, and we chastised them with little more than a polite request that they please not do it again. We've done everything we can to lift them up and exalt them as the new Leviathan. The least they can do in return, one feels, is to show a little empathy. Besides, look what we've done with the old Leviathan, the government. For decades, we've attacked it, redirected it, outsourced it, and filled it with incompetence and cronies. Yes, it still works well enough when we need to blow up some small country, but those branches of it designed to help our Americans of lower socioeconomic status, in quotes, as the scientists would put it, are now bare. We need the rich to be nice. We need them to stop doodling, paying and to pay attention and get generous. Now that the government has divested from the empathy business, we need the rich to discover brotherly love and fast. Come to think of it, wasn't that supposed to be the deal in the first place? The arrangement Andrew Carnegie brokered over a century ago when he made his big career move from Steel King to public library baron? The laissez-faire social contract would grant private business a free hand, but in exchange, those who piled up massive wealth were supposed to extend a magnanimous hand to the rest of us. As Carnegie wrote in his famous 1889 essay, The Gospel of Wealth, we don't need socialism to solve our problems. Philanthropy is the true antidote for the temporary inequality distribution of wealth and reconciliation of the rich and poor, quoting Carnegie. Going further, Carnegie argued that the duty of the man of wealth was, quote, to consider all surplus revenues which come to him simply as trust funds, which he's called upon to administer in the manner which, in his judgment, is best calculated to produce the most beneficial results for the community. The man of wealth thus becoming the mere trustee and agent for his poorer brethren, end quote. That same way of thinking led Carnegie to support the estate tax. Of all forms of taxation, this seems the wisest, he wrote. It was wise because it would, quote, induce the rich man to attend to the administration of wealth during his life. And if he didn't, then the tax would return most of his hoardings to the community from which it came, using Carnegie's words. Vestiges of the Carnegie attitude survive to this day. 2009 study of high net worth individuals by Barclays Wealth confirmed that American philanthropists tend to understand their giving in a context in which the state is either absent or irrelevant. And of course, there are plenty of nice plutocrats who don't fidget or doodle when talking to strangers and who have no problem endowing a ward or a wing in return for a commemorative plaque. The business headlines even occasionally tell of billionaires coming together under the leadership of Warren Buffett and Bill Gates to donate their fortunes to worthy causes. But the billionaires with the strongest sense of class solidarity have a very different plan for their disposable income, activating their lobbyists in Washington, building grassroots movements to march on their behalf, and using their media properties to run experiments on human credulity. Rendezvous with Oblivion.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. I am a big believer in stuff that works and in sharing stuff that works. And, you know, we had this conversation with Richard Bandler on Tuesday, and John Laval is with us. He is a master trainer of NLP and Design Human Engineering, DHE. He is the president of the Society for NLP, which is the group that licensed me way back, geez, I don't even know how many years ago, 15, 17, something like that, more than that. Well, actually, in fact, it was in the 80s when Louise and I both got first licensed as practitioners and then as a trainer. And I wanted to, and John, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Great to have you with us. And I wanted to talk to you about NLP and neuro-linguistic programming. First, for people who might not have heard our conversation with Richard 2 days ago, and it's probably a large chunk of our audience that didn't, can you recap for us just, you know, briefly what NLP is? What are people here at this seminar for? Why, you know, where did it come from? All that kind of stuff.
Sure. NLP is about how the brain works with language.
Hang on just a second. It just said, Sean just said not hearing your mic, and it looks to me like your mic is sending. Let me just check real quick. Yeah, his mic should be sending to you, Sean. Okay, got it now.
2, 2,
Go ahead.
1.
Yeah, start over again, John. My apologies.
That's okay. NLP is about, it's how the brain works, about how the brain works with language and behavior. And that's really what got me very interested in it. So people come to a seminar like this to learn a number of different things. One is how to have their communication a little bit more precise, learn how their brain works. We're not taught how our brain works, actually, right? And how does that connect to behavior? So I can give lots and lots of different examples of what would be useful in using NLP, because a lot of people, they think it's like, first of all, it's not a panacea. A lot of people think it's a panacea, it'll cure anything or fix anything, and that's not totally true. It will teach people how to use their brain, which is important, and how to use their language in order to project out what it is they're trying to communicate to people. A couple examples, for example, let's see. In business, for example, I like to do these things in business. In business, companies don't, for example, they don't communicate their mission very well or their objectives very well or even their strategies very well to their employees. As much as they might, wordsmith things and everything else like that, they may use words that don't necessarily work or work for everyone. Let me say that. Example. I'm going to give you an example. There's a list of words. I refer them in business as motivator words. In the language business, they're known as modal operators, and they're real simple. Here's a small list of them. Want, need, wish, like to, will, must, words like that. So all of these words don't work for everyone in the same way. So if I'm your boss, let's say I'm your boss, and I said to you, there's a report you give me, your activity report from the previous week, let's say. And I said to you, I wish I could get my reports from you on Monday. I don't know what's the propensity of me getting that report on Monday based on that one word. So even for the people out there right now, if I said to you or said to them, think about this, and if I were your boss and I said to you, I wish I could get my reports from you on Monday, what are the chances of me getting my reports based on that word? On wish, just on wish. Most people would shrug their shoulders and say, oh, maybe you'll get it Wednesday. Next word. So I would like to have my reports on Monday. What's the propensity? What are the possibilities of me getting that report on Monday on that one word? And the reason what I do is I ask people to, when they hear the word just as a test for themselves, what's the feeling they get to the word in terms of their motivation of doing that based on that word? Well, what if I said, I want my reports on Mondays? Does that up the chances of me getting my reports on Mondays? Okay.
Depends on whether I care about what you want.
Absolutely. You may not care what I wish.
Yeah.
You might not like, John, you'd like to have my reports, I'd like to have a raise. Right. I need my reports on Mondays. And you might think, well, John, if you need the reports, why don't you do the reports? Or I might say, I must have my reports on Mondays. And that might up the possibility of me getting my reports on Mondays. It's just one little list of words.
Sure. So if we're talking about precision of language, if I can, this is a political talk show.
Sure.
And without talking about our personal politics, what are some of the big mistakes that people make when they try to communicate in general? I know we're going to talk with your wife about communicating in couples and relationships and friends and all that kind of stuff, but just trying to communicate concepts, political concepts.
Yep. Well, again, it's going to depend on the language they use. So, if they say, first of all, one of the words they'll use a lot is we, instead of saying I, right? And so, if you think about it, if they said, well, I think we need to do this, or we think we need to do this, what happens in someone's brain, what kind of images do they make when in either of those two cases, for example? That's just a simple thing. Or we've done this, or even things like we have decided to do this, as opposed to a decision has been made to do this. Both of those might or might not reach the objective of what they want someone to understand. But each one of them is going to have a different impact on the receiver, let's say, on the receiver of that communication. I like to listen to politics. I like to listen to the speeches and things like that. I like to listen for how long are the sentences they're using, what kind of adjectives, how many different adverbs are they using. When I grew up, I was fascinated with grammar. I was one of those kids in school who liked diagramming sentences. I was probably the only one of two maybe in the whole class. But it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about how language works and how it operates. And it kind of hung in there with me. So as far back as I can remember, I would listen to how people were saying what they would be saying. And I realized even more when I started learning about NLP, the technology, that you can make that even more precise if you really wanted to deliver the message. And it didn't have to be a hard message, but did it hit the point? Did it hit where you wanted it to hit, in the receiver's mind, basically. I look at political ads, and depending on who, it doesn't matter who it is actually, is there enough, I'm going to refer to the word meat in the message, or is it so ambiguous it leaves it up to the individual person to fill in the blanks?
One of the big pieces of NLP is that basically we experience the world through our senses.
That's right.
And we also construct our world, our internal world, with representations of those senses. In other words, we have feelings, we can also hallucinate feelings. We hear things, we can also hear our own voice or hear voices in our heads. We see things, we can also make pictures.
That's right.
We should do all those things, presumably, when trying to communicate with another person, whether it's communicating politics or communicating how great your product is?
Yeah, I would use all of the systems because one of the things is this. You don't know what the other person is doing in their brain. You may or may not know. Even if they're communicating with you, you may pick up some clues, let's say that. So in other words, if they're more visual than they are auditory, let's say, they're going to be kinesthetic. They're going to use feelings, and even smells and tastes sometimes. So you've heard people say that's a delicious idea, for example. Right? That's going to go right to the to the gustatory. So what we teach people to do, because especially like in advertising, use all of the systems, because you've got an open audience out there. You don't know what people's primary. I did some work in the stereo business with some friends of mine, and they wanted me to speak with their salesperson, up the sales, and they warned me ahead of time. They said, "Listen, he's a great guy. He knows a lot about stereos and all this stuff, but he's basically an engineer guy. He's not a salesperson." So I went up and spoke with the guy, and I noticed what customers were asking for, and he thought they want to hear. It's the stereo they want to hear, and that's not true. People would come in and they would say, that stereo looks like it sounds really good.
Ah, got it. We're hitting a break here, so we'll be right back. We're talking with John Lavelle. He's a master trainer of NLP and DHE and the president of the Society for NLP, purenlp.com.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with more of my conversation with John Lavelle here live from Orlando right after this. So we're back. We're talking with John Lavelle. He is the big cheese here, the guy who puts on the conference that I'm at and that we're talking about. Let's talk some more about pictures. You were explaining, how if somebody comes into a store to buy something, and even if it's a piece of audio equipment, and they're saying, hey, that looks like a great stereo to me, that means that person thinks in pictures.
Well, it means that in that context, they're looking at a stereo, and therefore thinking that it's going to sound really good. I'm not even sure if it goes that far, but they're going to buy the stereo based on what it looks like, not what it sounds like. Right. And back in the earlier days, of course, the more bells and whistles and lights it had, and blinking things and little gauges and stuff, that they would be more impressed with that as a stereo. Because
I remember those.
Because even after they bought it, they would say things like, "Oh, wait till our friends come over and see this stereo." Yeah. And so it's interesting to me, and there are other examples of that, by the way. Someone might want to buy an automobile, and they go into the automobile dealership, and they might think they want a car it's a red car because it's fast. Somehow or another, the red car equates to fast, and that's a kinesthetic thing, fast, basically, right? Because we use our five senses, it doesn't mean we really know what someone's primary system is going to be, or let's say favorite system, because we do use all of them. Some people will say, well, I don't really make images, and I say, actually, you do. You may not be aware of the pictures or the images in your head. And then we have the internal voice. You mentioned the internal voice. Everyone I know talks to themselves at one point in time or another. What is it that voice does for them? Does it help them or does it hinder them? And so all of these things come into play. I find in business that even being able to parse information for people, on a simple basis, because the one thing I really appreciate is people who are doing something, getting results or performing their job, basically. And so a company might call me and say, listen, I want to talk to my manager, Charlie. And I go, what's up? And they would say, he's not doing his job. And it's real simple, very simple thing. I say, does he know what his job is? So it's asking the right question. They say, well, he should know his job, what his job is. And I'm thinking, if he's not doing his job, there's a number of reasons for it. We can go to motivation. He's not motivated to do his job, okay? And managers aren't responsible for motivating people. I have people argue with me about that, but there's a different place where that comes in. So does he know what his job is? Does he not motivated to do his job? Does he have the skills for his job? He may not have the skills to do the job. We don't really know unless we ask questions. So what NLP does is give you the ability basically to ask better questions to find out what's going on. And once you know what's going on, then you can have a fix for that issue or whatever it is. I basically tell people the following things in business. Listen, you got to hire the right person. That's a skill and a science. You got to train the right person. And then you got to promote the right person. And this is how you keep business going. It's like this. How you treat customers. More than that, how do you treat your employees? Because they're your best asset. They are your biggest asset.
Yeah, absolutely.
The customers, they help you pay the bills. But the employees help the customers.
Yeah, totally agree. And I've got some great employees, by the way. Give me a plug to Sean and Nate and everybody else out there. We'll be right back with John Lavelle. Stick around. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by XChair, the XChair office chair. XChairTom.com is the website, XChairTHOM.com. Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by SuperBeats. More information is available over at tomsbeats.com, THOMSBEETS.com, or by calling 800-568-9889. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Cameron Hughes scours the world looking for the finest wines. You can get more information about Cameron Hughes and his wines at chwine.com/Tom, Thom.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Talking with John Laval. He is a master trainer of NLP and DHE, the president of the Society of NLP. The website for your organization and the seminar I'm attending is purenlp.com.
Right.
And you can learn all about what I'm doing. Scott Carter was here on our program a couple days ago. He's here. Louise, of course, my wife. We're taking this together. John, we were talking about the guy wanting to buy the stereo and saying, you know, I want one that looks kind of cool, or you know, right. I like the lights and things because he was into what it looks like. And we're talking about how to make communication effective. How would a salesperson screw that up, or how would a salesperson make that work? And if you could also, at the same time you're answering that, tell the people who are listening or watching how, if they're trying to similarly communicate an idea, a political concept to somebody, or, you know, and of course this applies to everything, but, you know, again, it's a political talk show. How to be most effective at doing that? Because I'm guessing that they're pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, basically you're talking about influence. So to me, persuasion and influence, they come under the same category. Anybody who thinks they're not influencing people, it's time to wake up.
Well, you know, one of the big objections is, oh my God, this is manipulation.
Right. There are a couple of ways to answer that question. One is, yes, it is. And if you look at the definition, that means to move something from point A to point B. Some people have had a negative experience around the word, which I understand that. However, if you're in an elevator and there's someone else in the elevator and you smile at them, why are you smiling at them? And most people say, well, so they'll smile back. And my next question is, are you manipulating them? So, you know, I also understand that the negative side of it. But you know what? We don't propose that at all. I mean, that's you know, we want to do the win-win thing.
Yeah, you guys are, one of the things that really impresses me about you guys is that you're really high integrity, you know, in what you're doing, and the whole ecology check thing. But back to the salesman who's trying to convince, or the friend that you're trying to convince about a political point of view.
Yep. One thing is you got to be honest about your product or your service. I mean, that's important. And how are you going to communicate that, right? You've got to know your market. You know, you've got to know who are the buyers in your market, basically, really. Sexes, even, I don't care, it could be politics for that matter, right, depending on what it is you're selling.
Sure.
And there's something else that comes in that we refer to. It comes down to, it's basically about integrity kind of a thing, as you mentioned. And what happens is that people are going to track, okay, and it's very easy for them to do that. Do your words match your behavior? And that's something we look at based on, is it congruency or incongruency? Example, simple, I can use one in business, lots of them in politics. It doesn't even matter who the party is. It doesn't matter to me. You know, in a business, the boss will come and say, listen, we've got to cut costs and cut expenses. You got to lay 3 people off. And then he gets new furniture and hires 2 secretaries. But that's about not communicating the right message to begin with. We don't propose any of that. It does come into play, definitely in politics. Definitely comes into play. You know, some people play to their audience and then change it later, or they play to the different audience and then they change it. Right. I don't think people are that stupid that they don't pick that up. I think people pick that up.
In other words, eventually intentionally deceptive attempts at communication always inevitably fail.
Yeah, we don't
typically fail.
Yeah, we don't support that at all. Another thing about the technology and using it, if you ask someone a question, when I ask someone a question anyway, I expect an answer to that question. So are you paying attention as the communicator? So if I want information from someone and they go off on track B, am I going to come back and then repeat the question? Right. Because of the way the brain works, it's very fascinating to me. When you ask a question, people have to search for the answer to the question. And the one thing I don't know, unless there's some deception involved somewhere along the line, is how is it possible? Because once that once that question is being searched, the answer to the question is being searched in their brain, how do they change the track and go someplace else and not answer the question?
Right. I'm
fascinated by that. I'm just fascinated by that. And I understand not answering the question sometimes.
Sure.
Right? But it's all based on, the technology, it's about that too. Are you paying attention as the communicator? Are you getting the responses you want or not getting the responses you want?
Are you speaking in multiple modalities?
That's right.
Are you talking visual, kinesthetic, auditory?
That's right. That too.
How do you do that?
You do it simply. So I'm sitting here with you and I'm watching you as we're speaking, and I'm getting a sense for that you do a really great program here. Okay, so I just cycled around.
Right, so you just said visual, auditory, kinesthetic.
Right. So
and thank you, by the way.
It is a great program. I'm not kidding. And so, you know, I basically teach people, if they want to get the message across, and it's to the masses or groups of people basically, then learn to cycle through. You know, use visual words, auditory words, kinesthetic words, and more visual words, auditory words, kinesthetic words, right? And so, you know, once again, right, you know, so you and I, you're downstairs, you're doing parts of the seminar with us and things like that, right? And you're watching what's going on, you're engaging with people, you're talking to different people, you're doing exercise with people, so you're understanding more and more about how these things work.
Right.
And then after that's going to happen, then you're going to be able to see even more results going on because you're talking to different people and you're doing more kinesthetic things, right? Yeah. You'll be engaging more things, right? It'll be a kinesthetic work. So it's just a matter of practicing.
That's the
practicing. There
you go. John Lavelle, he is the president of the Society of NLP and the website purenlp.com.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Great having you with us. I'll be back with your calls about politics. We'll get back to politics right after this. Stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Free Trade Doesn't Work, What Should Replace It and Why by Ian Fletcher. This is from the introduction, which is titled Why We Can't Trust the Economists. America's trade, the book, by the way, was written, I think, around 2010 or 11. America's trade deficit, $696 billion in 2008, $701 billion in 2007, and a world record $760 billion in 2006. Even if it's fallen by half in 2009, a temporary plunge we've seen in past recessions that probably doesn't signify underlying improvement, a $370 billion trade deficit is still astronomical by any reasonable historical standard. To be fair, the trade deficit is not a perfect indicator of free trade's cost. A nation can always balance its trade by crude measures like forcing down wages by political fiat. So hypothetically, we could have a small deficit and a large trade problem. Plenty of impoverished third world nations have balanced trade, and a single year's deficit means nothing. But with numbers this high, our deficit is obviously a big problem, if it's a problem at all. And yet Americans remain afraid to do anything about it. The dangers of protectionism are notorious, and questioning free trade in an intellectually serious way runs into deep waters of economics very fast. So we remain paralyzed in the face of crisis. Over the last 20 years, Americans have brought over $6 trillion, that's trillion with a T, more from the world, bought more from the world than we have sold back to it. That's over $20,000 per American. Ironically, if the U.S. were a developing country, our deficits would have reached the 5% level that the International Monetary Fund takes as the benchmark of financial crisis. The U.S. economy has ceased generating any net new jobs in internationally traded sectors in either manufacturing or services. The comforting myth persists that America is shifting from low-tech to high-tech employment, but we are not. We're losing jobs in both and shifting to non-trade services, which are mostly low-value added and thus ill-paid jobs. According to the Commerce Department, all our net new jobs are in categories such as security guards, waitresses, and the like. The vaunted new economy has not contributed a single net new job to America in this century. Not one. The alchemy of international finance that lets America run a seemingly infinite overdraft against the rest of the world looks suspicious too, because that's what it means to endlessly import more than we export. But where does the money come from at the end of the day? Can we really get something for nothing forever? Or are we in for another crisis like the 2008 financial crisis? Subprime mortgages looked too good to be true, and then they blew up. The aftershocks are still hitting us. Is trade going to be the next shoe to drop? Common sense seems to say that American workers are going to have problems when we trade with nations such as China and India, where the average wage is $1 an hour or less. Corporate America even admits with barely concealed glee that competition from foreign labor has American workers pinned. As one Goodyear vice president put it, quote, "Until we get real wage levels down much closer to those of the Brazils and Koreas, we cannot pass along productivity gains to wages and still be competitive," end quote. Brazil? Korea? Our wages? These nations and others are booming as exporters to the United States, but they remain far too poor to take back enough of our exports to balance our trade. Their combination of dreadful wages and regulatory standards on the one hand and winning economic strategies on the other has had so far produced nothing like the living standards needed to make them significant importers of American goods. Despite recent decades of economic growth, there are still over 1 billion people in Asia earning less than $2 a day. Working conditions are the flip side of low pay in developing countries. Production methods long ago abandoned in the developed world, many of them dangerous and environmentally unsound, are still widely in use. In India, for example, foundry workers often don't wear socks, shoes, protective headgear, earplugs, or even eye protection. Often wearing no more than boxer shorts, they squat on the floor next to roaring furnaces. Charles Dickens has moved to Asia. The environment is threatened also. Thousands of foundries in China run on industrial-grade coke with no pollution control devices in their smokestacks, creating a plume of smoke that stretches across the Pacific on satellite photos. Chlorofluorocarbons are banned in the United States, but still used in China as a blowing agent for the production of polyurethane foam cushions and the like, providing a significant cost advantage for Chinese manufacturers. None of this happens by accident. Foreign governments treat trade as war and use, and use every trick in the book, legal and illegal under international agreements, to grab their industries a competitive advantage. And even when they don't cheat, they are often more skilled in cultivating their industries than we are. Toyota somehow didn't go bankrupt when GM did. All these facts impinge upon America because of free trade. But economists keep telling us everything will be fine. According to them, free trade is good for us and they can prove it. 93% of American economists surveyed support free trade. This inescapably raises the question of whether they've been doing their jobs or whether America should stick with the policy that they've recommended. This is a book about real-world economic problems, brutally real problems. But it's also a book about economic theory, because in economics, raw facts don't mean much without a theory to interpret them. This is especially true for parts of economics that are as controversial and theoretically unsettled as trade. Wrong theories helped get America into its current trade mess, so we need to get the right theories to get us out of it. Not only theories, of course, but we won't be able to do without them. Can't we just find a practical solution? That's the instinct of many Americans who find economic theory abstruse and often baffling. Unfortunately, not. Free trade doesn't work. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. I noticed, as we hit the break here over the bottom of the hour, that there's several questions on the board about NLP, and John's on lunch break right now, so I asked him if he would mind sticking around for another 7 or 8 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it may be, and just answer some of these questions. So let's pick up a couple of these. Carol in Menneson, Pennsylvania. Carol, thanks for watching the program. You're on the air with me and John Lavelle.
Hi, Doctor. I do have a question. I was wondering if NLP would be effective if it were taught from the earliest grades on. Would it help the children grow up with a little more clarity in the way they speak? A little more...
and John, I had...
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, finish your question, Carol.
I noticed that a lot of people don't speak very clearly. There's a lot of and yeah. And I was wondering if these principles of this NLP could be taught in school from the earliest grades, and a lot more oral exams would be done with the children. If that wouldn't help them speak more clearly and write more clearly when they're older. That's my question.
Okay. Carol, thank you. John, before you start talking, I just want to warn you, we have a small technical problem. I don't have it in my ear, but you will in yours. You will hear your own mic on about a half-second delay. So if it irritates you, you can just pull your earpiece slightly out while you're talking, but try it. Go
okay.
for it.
So the answer to your question is yes. As a matter of fact, there's a book that's it came out and we have to republish it called Teaching Excellence. That book was written by two people, Kate Benson and Dr. Bandler, and it was based on what's been going on in the educational system, at least in the UK, because that's where Kate is located. And she ran not just tests and doing things educationally differently with teachers and teaching them how to do this. They actually ran the research and kept track of the success and the results of this. And as such, that's really opened up quite a bit of information for the educational systems. To get it done in the U.S., of course, I think would be fantastic if we could do it, and it would certainly help the children. My son, as an example, we didn't teach him NLP. He just came in and he would hang out at the seminars with us. He would hang out with Dr. Bandler sometimes and things.
You've been doing this for like
yeah, it's been a long time.
19 years or something.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Yeah.
Pardon my interruption.
That's okay. He'd be at seminars probably since he was about 3 or 4. He'd sit in the back of the room and play with his toys and do things like that. However, he picked up the information. Now, I have to tell you, even though he's not formally trained, as I would think about a customer coming in and attending a seminar, he's probably one of the most well-skilled that I can think of, and not because he's my son. He's done negotiating for people against companies like Coca-Cola, and got his clients what they want, what the client would want. He's that good, and he's great at keeping track of things, which is important. And he's got a great sense of humor, because that's also important. It's important for everybody to have a good sense of humor, actually, because it's really good for the brain. You know, if you have a good sense of humor and you can start laughing at all kinds of things, you generate good neurochemicals, which really help the brain too. I think it would be fantastic for children. I think children are like they're like clay. You know, there's lots of things you can do for the children in the educational systems. The challenge, to be quite frank, are going to be the getting it into the educational systems, because there are lots of different agendas with the educational systems. So if we want children to learn to have freedom of thought and freedom of action, and understand there are consequences and things like that to their behaviors, if we're willing to do that, that'd be fantastic. I'm all for it. I think it's great.
I got to tell you a funny story in that context.
Sure.
Louise and I started a community for abused kids in '78, and then we started a school that spun off from that a few years later. And we were using a lot of these principles, because I started to learn this stuff. Actually, the way I was introduced to NLP was the first psychologist that we hired for the community for abused kids was an NLP practitioner in 1979.
Okay, cool.
And he taught me this stuff.
Right.
And so then I started teaching it, and we did the school. And I went into this one school in Detroit, and the teacher, it was sitting in the teacher's lounge with a bunch of teachers and the principal, and this one teacher was complaining about her second graders and how half the class is learning disabled. You know,
Right.
They got ADD, they got this and that and the other thing. And I said, I understand that, and I understand that label, but are you trying to tell me that they don't know how to learn? And she's like, yeah, they don't know how to learn. It's a real problem. And I said, do you know the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments of the Constitution? Do you know exactly which one's which? If I said, what's the 7th Amendment, would you know? And she's like, well, I know what they are, but I don't know. And I said, give me 20 minutes with your kids, your second graders, and we'll see if they can learn the Bill of Rights. Frontwards, backwards, the whole thing.
Right.
She's like, no way. And they're all like,
Sure.
I said, just, trust me, close the door, let me go in there, let's have some fun. I walk in there, I say to the kids, we're going to play a game. I want you to imagine the street out in front of your house. Remember the street in front of your house? Now just imagine a giant church comes falling out of the sky, wham, right in front of you on the street in front of your house, this giant church. And the windows smash open and all these guns start sticking out. Now, oh my God, there's all these guns. Look at those guns. People are shooting guns at us. And you and all your friends, everybody's so scared of those guns, you're starting to pee your pants, but oh no! Wait a minute! I missed a piece. As the guns are coming, and these soldiers now the government sees this thing, so they send these soldiers, and the soldiers parachute in to to protect you from the guns. But still, you're scared to death from that. And now the soldiers are even scarier, and you're wetting your pants, and you're kind of trying to hide that and protect your privacy a little bit. And I just go through, and it's a story, right? And then after I'm all done with the story, and they're all making these pictures, right? And after I'm done with the story, I'm going, okay. the First Amendment is the right of freedom of religion. The second one is, gun rights. The third one is you don't have to quarter soldiers in your home. And I had to explain that, but, it takes a minute. The fourth one is the right of privacy. And you go through all 10 of them. Bring the teachers back in, and just, Johnny, what's the Fourth Amendment? Sally, which, and they're like, that's a trick. Right? I mean, they didn't even want to believe that it was possible. And I'm like, why don't you start teaching like this? Anyhow, if you want to comment on that, feel free. We got another call on NLP here.
We've gone through the same kind of thing. We've gone into a one school system in New Jersey kind of thing. And we talked about we could teach the children how to spell. Right. Because it's not a phonetic activity. It's not phonics. You can't use phonics to spell phonics. Right. If you did, it should be spelled F-O-N-I-X. Right. So we asked them to bring us the worst speller that they had, and they brought this young kid, probably about 11 years old, and this is important. And I asked one of the teachers, I said, do me a favor, go to the school library and get me a medical dictionary. And she said, okay. And she went to the school library, and meanwhile we're speaking with the kid, and we're teaching him the strategy of spelling, because it's not that difficult, actually. It's like you were doing.
Making pictures.
Yeah, well, it's how do they spell? How do the best spellers spell? It's a strategy. What do they do first? What do they do second? What do they do next? Well, to begin with, when the teacher came back, she brought me a book on dinosaurs. And I didn't ask for a book on dinosaurs. Well, that's part of it. And I said, did they have a medical dictionary in the library? And she said, I don't know. I just saw the book on dinosaurs, so I figured that would do. Now, the only reason I wanted a medical dictionary because the kid would not be familiar at all with medical words, probably. And I was looking for long words. We were looking for long words. My wife was doing this with and I was there. And so I would use the dinosaur word. I have them spell the word forwards and backwards. And they think it's a trick until you ask them what color, because we use colors for the letters, what color is the fourth D? And he would know the color of the fourth D. Right. And he could spell the word forward and backward. Right. And here's a child who's the worst speller. Right. And the same response, that's a trick. Okay, then use tricks.
Yeah,
if that's
exactly.
what you want to do, then you use tricks.
Yeah, Richard was talking a couple of days ago about how he had a class of kids who couldn't do math, and he says, I'm going to teach you how to cheat in your own head.
That's
and
right.
Nobody will know because it's in your own head. You don't need to write it on your hand. You're going to write it in your brain.
Right.
It's cool stuff. Okay, we got a quick question. I just got a 2-minute cue from Sean. So Pat in Greeley, Colorado, you got a question for John?
Yes, I was wondering if there was any research done on NLP relationship to dementia, either slowing, stopping, or even possibly reversing dementia.
Interesting question.
It is a good question. I don't, not that I'm aware of. There is a lot of research being done, not necessarily with NLP, because we're primarily concerned with the software in the brain. We're a little bit knowledgeable, but Richard's very knowledgeable, actually, about the hardware things. But there seems to be more hardware things that can maybe be done rather than the software things that can be done. When I say hardware things, listen, I'm very clear to explain to people your brain is made up of, besides the gray matter, it's made up of something, I made the word up, I call it brain juice. It's mostly water, also about 25 to 28% fat.
Right, that's the omegas, right?
And that's right, the good fats, and the rest are basically neurochemicals and other things. But it's the mostly water and the fat that could contribute to reducing the effects of. There's also some work, I can't quote it directly, some work that is being discovered now, and they're discovering something about certain proteins for the brain, in the brain, that reduce memory, basically, and there's ways of cleaning that up.
But we just have 20 seconds. A real quick question. If you had somebody who's experiencing dementia, even if it's normal age-related dementia, let's not even call it dementia, let's call it forgetfulness, wouldn't learning these techniques help them be more useful, be more functional?
Yeah, we can teach them to remember to take their medications, and remember to take their vitamins.
Remember to turn the stove off.
Remember to turn the stove off. Remember to drink more water and get more fat into their brains, basically. That could help. I believe that can help.
John Lavelle, he's the president of the Society for NLP, master trainer, and the website is purenlp.com.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back with Talk Media News in 4 minutes. Stick around. And welcome back. Let's just take one more quick question here, John. This is Michael in Kansas watching us on Free Speech TV. Michael, you are on the air with John Lavelle.
Yes, I would just like to know, with PTSD, they call it post-traumatic stress disorder, and some people just say it's post-traumatic stress. I'd like to know, what is the disorder? I'm 100% PTSD from combat in Vietnam, and I was just wondering, what was the disorder part?
Yeah, well, we don't look at it as a disorder. We look at it, there has to be a re-education, basically. We realize people go through experiences. We realize some of those experiences are horrible experiences, basically. And there is a way of reducing, the residual effect of those experiences. So it's a matter of teaching people with PTSD. There are two things, actually. I'm going to say that what we don't do, which I think we ought to be doing in the military, is teach people how to use their brain in such a way that they don't get PTSD based on the experiences they're going to experience.
But if I've had my leg blown off, how am I not going to be traumatized?
Sure. I understand that. But we can reduce the effect of that. Right. Okay. We can reduce the effect of lots of things if we teach them how to do certain things inside their brain.
For example,
there's a couple of things that happen. The main thing that happens is that because of the shock of the experience, that really rearranges neurochemistry, and the memory thing is right there. I mean, it's going to be there. We can teach people how to immediately, and that's called, they're associated to the experience, is what the issue is in the brain, This does no way does this diminish the experience, It's about how we remember the experience. Right. So the first thing is and they go inside their head a lot, because they're remembering the experience, basically. So the first thing would be to teach them how to dissociate from the memory, so that they're not there as if it's still going on. Right. That's important. And then the second thing would be to give them enough exercises to do to go out and look at things, go out and have a good time in the park, basically to stay out of their head more, stay outside. Experience what's outside here, not what's in here all the time. Those things. I think we could reduce, I don't say eliminate, but we can seriously reduce the effects. Now, for someone who already has PTSD, we can teach, basically, they can learn how to not have that continuous experience again in their brain.
Right. Now, this is not what you would call therapy. This is just helping understand how your brain works, like pushing the picture away or changing the sounds, or changing your self-talk about it. Right?
That's right. That's exactly right. Right.
So.
And there are a lot of people out there that I know of, that do that. They're not all over the planet. They're not all over the U.S., people who do the PTSD thing. We happen to be here in Florida, and I know a woman who she does that. That's all she does. she focuses on that, PTSD. So, those things can certainly be done.
Yeah, that was an interesting question from
it was. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We appreciate the veterans, by the way. We support the veterans.
Yeah, we do. Okay, we're hitting a break. We're going to the news break now. John Lavelle, the Society of NLP. He's the president of the Society of NLP. The website is purenlp.com. And we're going to be back with Kathleen, John's wife, and we're going to be talking with her at the top of the hour, so stick around. Thank you, John.
Good.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair, the X-Chair office chair. xchairtom.com is the website, xchairtom.com. Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beats. More information is available over at thomsbeats.com, THOMSBEETS.com. or by calling 800-568-9889.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Cameron Hughes scours the world looking for the finest wines. You can get more information about Cameron Hughes and his wines at chwine.com/Tom, T-H-O-M.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
With the Talk Media News Service, this report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Loving What You Do, Ellen Ratner's new book. Bob is also the author of Sideswiped, the story about his time in Congress as a Republican congressman from Ohio. Fascinating story about how Congress really works. Bob, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Tom.
So what's in the news today?
Well, let's go to Kavanaugh first, because as doing, I do news stories across the country. I've been paying particular attention to everything coming out of West Virginia. And on the Talkline Communications radio yesterday and some communications today, Senator Joe Manchin, a Democratic senator from West Virginia, had a quote, Kavanaugh has all the right qualities, end quote, of a Supreme Court justice, and he will defer to...
So we've lost a Democratic vote on that.
Well, yeah, and I wanted to mention this because
the Democrats have.
I've been tracking this for about 3 days. He sort of did a dance on Monday, but nothing, near anything concrete about speculation of who would come out. And then Tuesday, nothing, but I think obviously Wednesday and today, quoting has all the right qualities and will defer to his constituents. Although he is in a extreme box on this, he's also leaving it open to listen to, testimony. But I think I just want to throw that out there. It's pretty telling when he says, quote, has all the right qualities. Yeah. And this is in light of
he said
Susan Collins.
He said, he was going to do what his constituents want. It's got to be a tough one for those guys.
It is.
What else is up, Bob?
It is. Well, the other thing too is the Republicans are having an extreme identity crisis, period, and that is dealing with the meeting with Putin. Without even talking about, what happened at NATO. But they are having an internal type of civil war of sorts when it comes down to where they're going to be. Some of them are afraid to come out and say much at all. But then there are others who are, obviously commenting. Senator John Thune, a Republican of South Dakota, has expressed frustration with the propaganda that followed the recent visit and has urged Trump to take a hard line with Putin. Talks about the state of the media, et cetera. And then Bob Corker, who's not going to be in the Senate next year, but a Republican from Tennessee, as you know, a key player. He's chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And he said, I was just in the region last week, and it's really disturbing to hear conversations people are having at the highest levels, whether they're reliable or not in regard to Trump. And then there are people, not a lot, but Senator Richard Shelby said that we don't need to be adversaries with Russia, and it is the beginning of a new day. So I think that...
Well, I was just saying, this has to be a really tough one for Republicans who have historically, and a lot of Democrats too, for that matter, historically been, from just hard line, better dead than red. I mean, literally the quote from your and my childhood, to opposed to Russia. Now you've got a president who's embracing Russia and Putin on the one hand, but on the other hand, doesn't it make a certain amount of sense to try to have a good relationship with other countries? We have an ally in Turkey. They're a member of NATO. Erdogan is an insane autocrat. You've got what's his name in the Philippines, Duterte. I mean, it's just anyhow. Your thoughts on how's the Republican Party dealing with this, Bob?
Well, look, we had Barack Obama who actually, decreased the amount of centrifuges with our, quote, enemy, the clerics of Iran, but he did it. And
you're right, Obama negotiated with Iran.
Right. And so, But I can tell you from being out there in Congress, I mean, the hatred in the good days of Putin, when he was new and wasn't viewed bad. In the good days, Tom, there was extreme anger at Russia, anything to do with Russia. So I think some of them will speak out, but I think a lot of people are going to go to the duck pond that would normally have said something, but they're going to have a hard line balancing between constituents, all their past activities and quotes about Russia, than trying to deal with Donald Trump, who is going to be meeting with Putin. So, I don't think Trump's meeting with Putin to just necessarily, badmouth him. And personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with kind of taking a deep breath and backing off of this thing a little bit so we don't have some kind of military confrontation. But the Republicans are really
negotiate
having...
at Trump Hotel Moscow while he's at it?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Finish your sentence, Bob.
Yeah, but they're having a definite identity crisis on this. The other thing is the new asylum policy, which is unbelievable. I'm sure there will be an immediate court challenge somewhere on maybe an emergency basis for the fact that the president has now ordered for basically asylum to stop if you're at the border, is what happened yesterday.
So it's the end of, basically, we've signed treaties. I mean, this is U.S. law that we offer asylum to people who, once we've determined that they're legitimate asylum seekers,
right,
not just trying to hustle
their way. But if you read this, they're to be deemed illegal and to be turned around at the border.
Wow.
With the order.
Amazing.
Yes.
Amazing. And so instead of taking them, arresting them, and separating families, they're just going to instantly deport the whole bunch of them.
The instructions are, if they're coming in illegally, they're to be returned.
Remarkable. Bob Ney, author of Sideswiped, reporter with Talk Media News, former member of Congress from the great state of Ohio. Bob, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm always so informed by your insights. We'll be back with Kathleen Laval right after this.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair, the X-Chair office chair. xchairtom.com is the website, xchairtom.com. Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beats. More information is available over at thomsbeets.com, thomsbeets.com, or by calling 800-568-9889.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Cameron Hughes scours the world looking for the finest wines. You can get more information about Cameron Hughes and his wines at chwine.com/Thom, Thom. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Carbon Shock, A Tale of Risk and Calculus on the Front Lines of a Disrupted Global Economy by Mark Shapiro. This is from the introduction. Chaos, uncertainty, unpredictability. Those are the characteristics of the natural world under the pressures being wrought by climate change. Normal patterns of rainfall, temperature, and extreme weather are changing so rapidly that past baselines for these primordial forces are less and less relevant. Scientists have a word for this state of flux. They call it, quote, the end of stationarity, end quote, a term with a powerful meaning. we can no longer rely on past events to predict future probabilities. The ground is shifting beneath our feet. Now it's becoming increasingly clear that the volatility we're seeing in our natural world is reshaping our financial world too. While we try to hold on to our bearings in the status quo and conduct business as usual, new risks are entering into the equation and new costs are creeping onto the balance sheets of corporations and nations. Just as chaotically as climate change is altering conditions here on Earth, it is changing our understanding of the actual costs of just about everything. In the financial realm, as in the natural realm, the past provides fewer and fewer clues to our future. Like the migration patterns of songbirds that no longer correlate to the hatching patterns of their insect prey, or the mountain snowpacks that no longer store water for the dry summer months. The economy is facing similar miscues born of the interactive loop between tumult in the atmosphere and tumult on the earth. Economic calculations are being upended in ways that are similar to how the digital revolution transformed financial decision-making, though on a far more monumental scale. In early 2014, a report by the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, produced and reviewed by more than 1,000 scientists and approved by 194 governments, identified the economic impact of the enormous changes underway. Slowing the rate of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere would not have devastating impacts on the economy, as is often feared, but would require a fundamental rethinking of our priorities and of our existing business models. Unstated but clearly implied, new forces will rise and others will fall as the true costs of carbon become an increasingly potent economic factor that can no longer be ignored. In 2013, an insurance industry research association called for an entirely new paradigm for assessing risk because rapid-fire changes in weather and temperature are outpacing traditional actuarial calculations. In other words, we are on the threshold of carbon shock. There are 5 greenhouse gases. Together, these gases of related, though different provenance, are in a circuit of relationships that give them the same ultimate impact, trapping heat in the Earth's lower atmosphere, giving rise to the greenhouse effect. Up from the center of the Earth comes a 100-billion-year-old periodic table of decaying organic fossils in the form of carbon dioxide and methane, embedded in oil, coal, and natural gas, thus the terms fossil fuels. From the combustion of these ancient fossils comes O3, also known as ozone, derived from the interaction of sunlight with CO2 and other hydrocarbons, and O2, nitrous oxide, which in addition to being emitted from, from industrial sources, is also contained in fertilizers and released from soil through agricultural tilling, and a synthesized family of hydrofluorocarbons generated as waste products from the production of other chemicals, primarily refrigerants and pesticides. In the gas world, they are all cousins, baton passers of molecular reaction that conspire to create turmoil in the heavens. Carbon dioxide is by far the most abundant, which is why carbon has become a stand-in reference for all greenhouse gases. It's not that carbon hasn't always had a cost. It's just that, until now, carbon's costs have been, for the most part, invisible. We haven't been accounting for them. Just as an optical illusion tricks the eye into seeing something that's not there, traditional accounting diverts our attention from invisible costs. We only see profits. Keeping these costs a mystery has been fundamental to our economic growth. Businesses benefit from a false ledger in which the environmentally corrosive impacts of the energy they use to produce, distribute, and dispose of everything from almonds to automobiles have been dramatically undercounted. 3,000 of the world's biggest companies, according to the United Nations report, could lose a third or more of their value if calculations of profits included the actual environmental costs. Most of these costs are the result of greenhouse gases emitted from the burning of fossil fuels, from which 82% of the world's energy is derived. Unlike smog or smoke or other acute contaminants, you can't necessarily see greenhouse gas pollution, but we are the involuntary recipients of its steadily expanding effects. These effects come to us fractured in scattered reports of distress, polar bears floating off on melting glaciers, hurricanes tearing into distant coastlines, droughts sending farmers into panic, remote island states sinking into the seas. When, in the summer of 2013, a gas chromatograph perched atop the Mauna Loa volcano in Hawaii reported that the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere had, for the first time, reached 400 parts per million, it not only triggered alarm bells from scientists, but signaled costs to come. The world's two biggest economies, the United States and the European Union, estimate hundreds of billions of dollars in cost from heat waves, floods, and an accelerating flow of refugees fleeing lands in which they can no longer sustain themselves. Both classify climate change as one of the... Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back, live from Orlando. Louise and I are here at the seminar on neurolinguistic programming, and I'm so happy to have in the, well, we're not in the studio, but here in the hotel with me, Kathleen Laval. Kathleen is a master trainer in neurolinguistic programming and design human engineering. She is the program director of NLP Seminars Group International. The website is purenlp.com.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And Kathleen, welcome.
Thank you. Welcome, Tom. I'm
great
glad to
having
be
you.
here.
Me too. I'm so glad you're here. You are one of the most impressive people to me. I should tell our listeners and viewers. Louise and I are studying this stuff. We're learning, and Kathleen has been one of the trainers, and I've been through NLP trainings all the way back to the early '80s. And you are so clear. You are so good at what you do, and I'm so happy to have you with us.
We're happy to have you at the seminars too.
Well, thank you.
Because I've been waiting to meet you.
It's great. Yeah, me too. So let's start out. 2 days ago I asked Richard, what is NLP? An hour ago I asked John, what is NLP? I'm curious from your point of view, what is NLP?
So it's my turn.
Your thoughts?
Well,
and also some people just tuned in.
Yeah, of course. So NLP stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming, and neuro referring to the brain and how the brain works, linguistic referring to language that we use, and programming refers to the sequencing or the packaging, parceling of information in our brain. So for many people, we know how to use our brain for the most part, but we're not always aware of our language. So the language we use inside our brain when we talk to ourselves and the language that we use with others. There's so much more we can learn about that to be able to use it better. And the sequencing of information in the brain, some of us have great strategies. We can get up in the morning, fabulous, but we stare at the checkbook and we go, I should check that, I should balance that later. So how do you learn to use the strategies you have and to build ones that you need to have?
That's a really good, concise, and to that, I'll tell you a short story, and then I'd love you to unpack my story if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
I was teaching a workshop. This was for people who were, quote, learning disabled, ADHD kids, adults rather, and years ago. And I simply asked the room, I said, who has trouble getting up in the morning? And some hands went up. And I said, who doesn't have trouble getting up in the morning? Who easily pops up? And other hands went up. And I asked people, are you willing to share what goes on inside your head when you wake up? And the first person who stood up, she said, I have a terrible time getting up in the morning. And I said, so what happens, and in fact, she said, I have 2 alarm clocks and they both have snooze buttons. So I go through 4 snooze buttons before I'm out of bed. So I said, what goes through your mind? And she said, I imagine myself showing up late at work, and then I imagine my boss firing me. And then I imagine myself not having a paycheck. And then I imagine myself losing my apartment. And then I imagine myself on the street living in a cardboard box. And then I imagine some guy beating the crap out of me because I'm sleeping on the street. And this is what she had to do to wake up. Now, then I asked the fellow who said, he wakes up in the morning and he has no problem. And maybe I'm mixing the genders here, but whatever. And yeah, it doesn't matter. And he said, I love talking to people. And so when I wake up in the morning, I imagine the conversations I'm going to have with people at work today. And I'm just so curious about what's going to be talked about. Now, why are those strategies consequential? What do those mean? And what does that tell you about how we can transform our own experience of motivation and life?
Sure. Well, motivation can be motivated by thinking about the things that we're going to avoid You know, so some people are actually work better with that. You know, you can sort of, you know, dangle the carrot, or not hit with the stick, but hold the stick and warn. So there's different ways that people motivate. So, you know, but she went through such a long, lengthy process of thinking about all the negative things. Who the heck would want to get out of bed after that? You know, that's going to be the rest of your day. You're going to go to work, you're going to get fired, living in a cardboard box, getting beaten up. I mean, she's just dumping an incredible amount of negative, what we call bad brain juice.
Yeah.
Because when you think those bad thoughts, when you have those really bad, you know, you're practicing almost how it would feel if this was a horrible thing that happened to me, you're also, your brain doesn't know the difference. So it's dumping those chemicals, you know, that are created in those negative states, and you're creating bad brain juice. And in bad brain juice, it's hard to motivate. It's hard to make decisions. It's hard to do things. Now, the other guy that's thinking about all the wonderful things that are going to happen that day, then simply he's already filling his brain with really good brain juice. So he's very motivated to get out of bed. Now, so it doesn't mean that it always has to be positive, but when she's in that loop of spending so much time with the negatives, you know, someone might have a strategy for getting up and they say, well, I wake up and I say, hey, at least I woke up. It's a good day. You know, the sun is shining. But, you know, this bed feels so comfortable. And then you think, oh, no, I don't want to be late, you know, and deal with my boss. And then you get out of bed. That's a little bit different. They're still doing that towards away from, you know, but not with spinning and all the negative things. So her strategy just had a very elongated sort of loop that really wasn't, you know, eventually it got her out of bed, but it probably wasn't getting her out of bed in a very good state. So you want to know the result of the strategy as well.
Right, and I think the result was that she was somewhat disabled by that.
Sure.
And so if you were working with her and teaching her how to make her brain work better, what would you say? What would you do?
Well, I would definitely find out more about her in terms of how she does motivate, because I'm sure there's something she's motivated to do. You know, whether it, you know, be simple like she loves dogs or she loves cats. So if you walking down the street and you saw somebody with the most adorable dog, she'd be very motivated to walk up to the person and go, oh, so cute, can I pet him? Or, you know, so there's something that somebody's motivated about. And I want to know how she does that. So that, how do you motivate yourself? I know it's not getting up in the morning, but I want to know, is she even possible to motivate herself with better feelings?
So just explicitly
and
ask
then
her?
Use that strategy. Yeah, I'd say, what are you motivated about? You know, that's a lot of work to get up in the morning. What's something that you're motivated to do and it just springs you into action? You don't have to loop through all these horrible things to do it. I'd want to know how she does that one, because that strategy works, but it's not really getting her good results. So I'd want to know something that's more compact, and then maybe help her to attach that to the content of getting up in the morning.
So just take that. Here's how I like.
Yeah, I see a dog, I feel great. I can start to talk to myself like, oh, I'm going to go ask her if I can pet it. So I would take those elements of the modalities and build a strategy for getting up in the morning.
This ties into how people relate in marriage, how in relationships, in initiating relationships, meeting people.
Sure.
In business, in politics, even discussing politics. What do you do when you're at Thanksgiving dinner and crazy Uncle Ralph goes off on his favorite Fox News rant or MSNBC rant, your choice. All those things. And I'd like to dig a little deeper into some of those things with you. We have just a minute until we're going to hit a break here.
Sure.
But the two strategies that I described, I think one involved the guy hearing his conversations, and the other was she was seeing her pictures. Is there a typical preference for one of you?
I don't think that people have a particular preference, or there's a percentage of this visual people, auditory people. I mean, I think we do everything. I mean, our brain does everything. But in certain situations, we kind of favor one or the other. But the key is to have the ability and the wherewithal to realize that if we're not connecting, and then I got to start listening. Are we on the same level? Am I saying I'm going to show you I love you, and you're saying, well, why don't you just tell me? You know, then it's time to step back and realize that you're talking different languages sometimes. But it's not that I'm always visual or you're always auditory.
Yeah, Remarkable stuff. We're talking with Kathleen Laval. She is a master trainer in neurolinguistic programming and design human engineering. She's the program director of NLP Seminars Group International. Her website is purenlp.com. And Kathleen can stick around with us for a while if you have any questions for her. We'll be right back. The number is 202-808-9925.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And the website for the seminar that Louise and I are at, and the whole shooting match here, is purenlp.com. No, we're back in here. So welcome back, Kathleen. So boy, we've just scratched the surface.
Just the surface.
Just, yeah. We haven't even, I'm sorry, Sean? In fact, we haven't really even identified the surface. I mean, yeah. Live? Yeah, you can't hear me?
Oh, we lost Tom.
You should be able to hear me, Sean, just fine. Can you hear me now, Sean? Hello? I don't know what's happened. Let me just make sure I haven't had a failure of some kind. 1, 2, no?
1, 2?
I don't know what happened. Sean? I'm talking. I'm not muted. Sean, can you hear me? Can anybody hear me? Hello?
I wonder if they can see us.
I wonder if our internet just went down. I wonder if the hotel just turned off. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Free Trade Doesn't Work, What Should Replace It and Why by Ian Fletcher. This is from the introduction, which is titled Why We Can't. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. We had a technical.
We're back.
Yeah, technology is crazy, especially when you're on the road. So I was saying we haven't really even identified the landscape that we're talking about here. We've talked about pictures and we've talked about sounds. What are some of the other things?
Well, with NLP, actually the most important thing is as long as there's a brain engaged, we can do something. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the greatest thing about NLP is that there's so much you can do with personal development in terms of, if you have problems communicating, there's great communication tools, like we were just talking about the visual, the auditory, the kinesthetic, and understanding that there's differences within those. But there's also language patterns, the way we say things to ourselves. You walk into a business meeting and you go, now don't get upset. What's the first thing you think in your mind? You're like, why? What happened? And they get upset. We tell children, don't spill the milk. And what images do you make inside your mind when I say that? You see milk spilling. And a tiny little human brain is going to go, it's a goal. I have a picture in my head. I can make that happen. And then we say you didn't listen. Well, they did listen. So it's also understanding the brain grammar. And when you understand brain grammar, what we call transformational grammar, you can make anything possible because you can communicate better, you communicate to yourself better. You're walking across that ice and you say, I'm going to walk smoothly and easily across this ice instead of saying, don't fall. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of things around brain grammar. We help people get over phobias in one session. And you'll see that in a couple days.
Yeah.
Because it's something that's learned. And if you learn something, you can unlearn it. Or you can learn to do something else instead.
And this is not therapy. This is using your brain the way it's designed to work. Right?
Absolutely. It's using your brain. It's creating more and new neurocortical pathways. It's about, building new abilities and learning how to use your brain. That's the problem. When you were born, did they give you an owner's manual? No. I didn't get one either.
That's what parents are, I guess. In theory, anyway.
In theory.
Oh, my. Okay. We'll be back with more with Kathleen Laval right after this. Stick around. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair, the X-Chair office chair. xchairthom.com is the website, xchairthom.com. Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beats. More information is available over at thomsbeets.com, thomsbeets.com, or by calling 800-568-9889.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Cameron Hughes scours the world looking for the finest wines. You can get more information about Cameron Hughes and his wines at chwine.com/Thom, Thom.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Back, Thom Hartmann here with you, and here in the hotel with us is Kathleen Laval. She is a master trainer in neuro-linguistic programming and design human engineering, and the program director of NLP Seminars Group International. PureNLP.com is the website. Kathleen, we were talking about motivation strategies and how they have internal conversations, how they have memories and things like this. Let's talk about communication, if we could. John and I talked about this a little bit too, and I'd love to get your take on it. Whether in our conversation with John, it was mostly, how do you communicate in business? How do you sell something or persuade, as it were? In relationships, how do we communicate? And taking that, the example I gave before, and we really never got to flesh it out, of, crazy Uncle Ralph comes to Thanksgiving dinner, or maybe not crazy Uncle Ralph, maybe it's the guy who's in the cubicle next to you at work, or maybe it's your best friend. How do you have, particularly if you strongly disagree with somebody's worldview, whether it's a political worldview or whether it's some other kind of worldview, if you're talking to somebody, well, even, an extreme example, you're talking to somebody who's a racist, you're talking to somebody who's a complete bigot. How do you have a communication with that person that might actually change the way that they experience their own, whatever their frame is that causes them to think that?
Right. The first response as you were asking me the question was, if I had somebody in a cubicle and I was at work, and I wouldn't even engage in the political conversation. The first thing is you have to decide, is there something you can do about it? Because sometimes it's worth just tuning it out. Right. The problem is that we get so upset now if somebody says something that doesn't agree with us or becomes offensive to us, and we want to argue. Right. And the arguing doesn't do anything. It just creates bad brain juice, for one, and we get ourselves all upset, and then we're cranky, and we get home from work, and then we're talking about the jerk at work and everything he said, and nothing gets resolved. So you really have to start thinking ahead. Is it worth it, number one? Now, if it is worth it, and to me, worth it would be, do I think I can somehow change this person in terms of, getting them to be a little more open-minded if they're closed-minded and they're being very racist and very bigoted? Is there a way that I can come to some neutral point with them that at least maybe open up the possibility that they could see things a little differently? We have something in NLP we call reframing. And with reframing, we look at being able to change someone's perspective, that they can look at something differently. A very quick example is a father says, oh, my daughter always says no to me all the time. That's all she does. No, 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 no. And you say, wow, you really raised a strong-willed daughter. Because he's thinking she's just defiant and everything else. And you go, wow, you really raised a strong daughter. Now, just by that one sentence, the sound you made was like, it's a change already of perspective. Yeah. And then if you took it contextually and you said, wow, I bet that would be pretty useful if she was out on a date with a boy, you'd be wanting her to say no, 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 no. Right. So there's always ways that you can get people to kind of look at things a little differently and change the perspective by reframing, because if you come straight out and just go, well, that's ridiculous to believe that, now you're invalidating them as a human being. And then you've lost all credibility to change. Remember, there's that magical thing we also teach about rapport. so that you can build a little unconscious rapport, whether, you know, we sit similar, we do some breathing, that you can begin to at least earn the right to talk to them, because we just walk in and argue.
Let's define rapport.
Okay. So rapport is a way for, the brain likes what's the same. However, it notices and learns by noticing what's different. Now, if you don't have the ability to spend a long time coming to an agreement, you can certainly, you know, sit very similar, or maybe match some breathing, or rate of speech. We all know how annoying it is when someone is talking very, very slow, and we're like, you know, we're talking very fast, and it just doesn't work out well. But if you begin to match some of those pieces, then at least unconsciously the person starts to feel like there's some similarity here. Because it's not enough to say to somebody, oh, I understand what you think. Oh, I understand what you're feeling. I understand what you went through. That doesn't work. The brain has to believe that there's something there that says, I understand, that there's some level that we can then have trust.
And the brain knows that how?
The brain knows that by looking for things that are similar. So the brain is going to go, we're in a similar situation, we're pacing the same way through breathing or rate of speech. So the brain just kind of feels comfortable. Right. If somebody comes in and they're rat, 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 you know, and complaining and spewing hate, and you walk in and go, oh, calm down, relax. You know, it doesn't help the situation, because the brain goes, this is completely different than what I'm doing right now.
Right.
So it doesn't really help.
Yeah. So you start out by, if somebody's sitting and you're standing, you might want to sit down and talk to them.
Yeah, pull up a chair and sit and go.
Right. And if somebody's talking softly, you talk softly?
Yeah.
Slowly.
You could start, slow down a little bit, talk a little softer if they're talking softly. You know, whatever it is that it takes to be able to have some sort of measurement of comfort.
And then the brain goes, oh, this person understands me, without you ever saying that.
Yeah.
And that's the beginning of communication.
That's the beginning point. That's a good place to start.
It's fascinating stuff. Can you stick around?
Absolutely.
Kathleen Laval is with us. If you have any questions about this, feel free to give us a shout, too, at 202-808-9925. We'll be back. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, live from Orlando.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back with Kathleen in just a moment. If you want more information, the website is purenlp.com. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Carbon Shock, A Tale of Risk and Calculus on the Front Lines of a Disrupted Global Economy by Mark Shapiro. This is from the introduction. Chaos, uncertainty, unpredictability. Those are the characteristics of the natural world under the pressures being wrought by climate change. Normal patterns of rainfall, temperature, and extreme weather are changing so rapidly that past baselines for these primordial forces are less and less relevant. Scientists have a word for this state of flux. They call it, quote, the end of stationarity, end quote, a term with a powerful meaning. We can no longer rely on past events to predict future probabilities. The ground is shifting beneath our feet. Now it's becoming increasingly clear that the volatility we're seeing in our natural world is reshaping our financial world, too. While we try to hold on to our bearings in the status quo and conduct business as usual, new risks are entering into the equation, and new costs are creeping out of the balance sheets of corporations and nations. Just as chaotically as climate change is altering conditions here on Earth, it is changing our understanding of the actual costs of just about everything. In the financial realm, as in the natural realm, the past provides fewer and fewer clues to our future, like the migration patterns of songbirds that no longer correlate to the hatching patterns of their insect prey, or the mountain snowpacks that no longer store water for the dry summer months. The economy is facing similar miscues born of the interactive loop between tumult in the atmosphere and tumult on the earth. Economic calculations are being upended in ways that are similar to how the digital revolution transformed financial decision-making, though on a far more monumental scale. In early 2014, a report by the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, produced and reviewed by more than 1,000 scientists and approved by 194 governments, identified the economic impact of the enormous changes underway. Slowing the rate of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere would not have devastating impacts on the economy, as is often feared, but would require a fundamental rethinking of our priorities and of our existing business models. Unstated but clearly implied, new forces will rise and others will fall as the true costs of carbon become an increasingly potent economic factor that can no longer be ignored. In 2013, an insurance industry research association called for an entirely new paradigm for assessing risk because rapid-fire changes in weather and temperature are outpacing traditional actuarial calculations. In other words, we are on the threshold of carbon shock. There are 5 greenhouse gases. Together, these gases of related, though different provenance, are in a circuit of relationships that give them the same ultimate impact, trapping heat in the Earth's lower atmosphere, giving rise to the greenhouse effect. Up from the center of the Earth comes a 100-billion-year-old periodic table of decaying organic fossils in the form of carbon dioxide and methane, embedded in oil, coal, and natural gas, thus the terms fossil fuels. From the combustion of these ancient fossils comes O3, also known as ozone, derived from the interaction of sunlight with CO2 and other hydrocarbons, and O2, nitrous oxide, which in addition to being emitted from, from industrial sources, is also contained in fertilizers and released from soil through agricultural tilling, and a synthesized family of hydrofluorocarbons generated as waste products from the production of other chemicals, primarily refrigerants and pesticides. In the gas world, they are all cousins, baton passers of molecular reaction that conspire to create turmoil in the heavens. Carbon dioxide is by far the most abundant, which is why carbon has become a stand-in reference for all greenhouse gases. It's not that carbon hasn't always had a cost. It's just that, until now, carbon's costs have been, for the most part, invisible. We haven't been accounting for them. Just as an optical illusion tricks the eye into seeing something that's not there, traditional accounting diverts our attention from invisible costs. We only see profits. Keeping these costs a mystery has been fundamental to our economic growth. Businesses benefit from a false ledger in which the environmentally corrosive impacts of the energy they use to produce, distribute, and dispose of everything from almonds to automobiles have been dramatically undercounted. 3,000 of the world's biggest companies, according to the United Nations report, could lose a third or more of their value if calculations of profits included the actual environmental costs. Most of these costs are the result of greenhouse gases emitted from the burning of fossil fuels, from which 82% of the world's energy is derived. Unlike smog or smoke or other acute contaminants, you can't necessarily see greenhouse gas pollution, but we are the involuntary recipients of its steadily expanding effects. These effects come to us fractured in scattered reports of distress, polar bears floating off on melting glaciers, hurricanes tearing into distant coastlines, droughts sending farmers into panic, remote island states sinking into the seas. When, in the summer of 2013, a gas chromatograph perched atop the Mauna Loa volcano in Hawaii reported that the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere had, for the first time, reached 400 parts per million, it not only triggered alarm bells from scientists, but signaled costs to come. The world's 2 biggest economies, the United States and the European Union, estimate hundreds of billions of dollars in cost from heat waves, floods, and an accelerating flow of refugees fleeing lands in which they can no longer sustain themselves. Both classify climate change as one of the...
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Here with you live from Orlando, Florida, where Louise and I are attending, and Scott Carter's with us too, our old friend, attending a conference on, it's a practitioner training, learning how to be a neurolinguistic programming practitioner, or a master practitioner if you're already certified as a practitioner. And the teachers are Richard Bandler, Dr. Richard Bandler, and John and Kathleen Laval. And Kathleen is with us right now. She is a master trainer in NLP and Design Human Engineering, DHE, and the program director of NLP Seminars Group International. And Kathleen, shall we take some phone calls?
Sure.
Yeah, sounds like fun. Let's start out with Bill in Sebastian, Florida. Bill, you're on the air. You're on.
Hey, good afternoon, Tom. Yeah, I was wondering, can this technique be used to persuade constituents by politicians, you know, as for their point of view? And can the military use this to demean detainees?
Okay, I wasn't sure, what was the word before detainees?
To, did you mean for like interrogation techniques and things?
Demean?
Yeah, brainwash technique.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bill.
NLP is not really about brainwashing, because even with hypnosis, which we teach, we believe all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. You know, the person has to want to go into a trance, go into a state. We don't really use or teach it to be used on anyone. Can it be? I mean, you can use anything for good or for not good purposes. So we don't really teach it in that way. I guess you could persuade someone, you'd have a better chance of persuading them, but to absolutely have control whether or not they're going to accept the information or not is really based on how well you present the information and what's in it for them. Because, you know, we don't believe in forcing anyone to change the way they think, but we have great skills to present a better argument for that so that they would want to. But even with hypnosis, if you ask somebody to do something under hypnosis that they really don't want to do, you know, you would absolutely see it. They would just, you know, start to come up out of it. Even if you just say something that's a little bizarre, you would see the difference in the level of trance. So we really don't do the anything, and we're very careful with ourselves, even with who we let into the program. You know, it was even for you, Tom. We know you, and it was still a lengthy application process.
There you go.
So that, you know, we want people that are here to make the world a better place, and we love it. We love doing that.
So to Bill's, the first part of his question, if I walk into a town hall with a member of Congress,
absolutely,
and I have the microphone and I'm going to ask him a question in public, or if I go into his office and he's willing to see a constituent and I'm going to sit down with him and I want to try and convince him that, you know, ABC is what he should do, whether it's to get my vote or because it's the right thing.
Yeah.
What do I do?
Well, the best thing to do, if it's available, is to start listening to recordings of them talking. You know, if they have been on TV or they have anything out that you can, on their website or whatever, to really start to listen to what it is, what's their criteria, what's really their buzzwords, what's the motivation pieces that they have when they're talking about things, what's really important to them. If you had an opportunity at any point to talk to them before the meeting, that would be even better, because then you could ask the question, well, what's important to you about, you know, the tax structure in the neighborhood if it's a town hall meeting, or what's important to you about your constituents and what they think of you. So if you don't have that opportunity, you can just listen to other, you know, interviews that they've had or other times that they've talked. They record most of those meetings. They're public domain. So that you would have already a pace and lead set up where you could pace. I know you want to do this and you think it's the right thing to do because it's important to you that these families or this neighborhood is this way, and, you know, so that you're pacing a little bit where they're at, even if you disagree with that, by pacing it a little bit first. And then you can add in something else that you want that to change and point out how that would then tie into the things that are important to him anyway. Because people aren't going to change their opinion if they have to give up something that's really important to them, whether it be a value or a criteria.
Right. So I guess there's a third dimension to that question, conceivably, which would be, let's say, we'll just hallucinate an example.
Sure.
You know, there's a school board meeting, and there's a debate about whether to build a new wing on the school. And you got some people who are very interested and very in favor of that, probably parents. You got other people who are opposed to it, probably taxpayers who don't have kids. But who knows? I mean, there's a whole range of reasons. And you're going to get up and you're going to say something to the school board, but you want to influence the 200 people sitting in the room, too.
Right.
What do you do?
Well, I think that if you already know the sides of the argument, you know that the taxpayers who don't have kids, you know, have an issue with spending any money on the school. So you have that, you log it.
Right.
You know that the people that have children in the school and they're tired of having 50 people in a classroom, you know that they're going to want to expand the school, and for those reasons. So you have 2 points that you can bring out already. Because what would be in it, you have to think about whether you go and talk to people who you know who are taxpayers and don't have children and say, I know you think we shouldn't spend money on the school, but what's important to you about the school that's here? You know, what's important to you about the kids get an education? So you have some information to go with, because the one thing we do know is if you're a taxpayer in that neighborhood and you don't have kids that are going to that school, you may not want to spend money on there, but what do you want the children in your neighborhood to be like?
That's kind of universalizing it. What kind of world do you want to live in?
Right.
What kind of neighborhood?
So do you want children that have been in a classroom with 50 people and aren't really getting taught and are getting frustrated and maybe misbehaving because they're not getting the right education? So those people are going to be loose in your neighborhood. Up and down your streets? Or would you rather have a bigger school where the kids are able to get great educations and good programs so that they're learning how to do art and music and all the things that we've been cutting away from these kids? And now these children are going to be better in your neighborhood, aren't they?
Right. And if you were super chunking it down, you could say, and it'll only cost the average taxpayer an extra $4 a year.
Sure.
You know, or whatever.
Yeah. Is $4 worth it?
Yeah.
To have better kids in your neighborhood?
Yeah. Fascinating stuff. Let's see here. Catherine in Burlington, Vermont. Catherine, you're on the air with Kathleen Lavelle.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Tom. I'm going to ask a question I'm sure somebody else has asked, but I just got on. I'll ask nevertheless. How do I deal with pig-headed people that just won't open up on any level at all from the moment of get-go? They're just, there's a wall there. Is there any way to deal
Catherine,
with that?
can you give me a for example? Or do you not need that, Kathleen?
Bigoted people that are stubborn, and they're dead sure that their bigotedness is reality. They have facts too.
Yeah. Kathleen, don't most bigots doesn't most bigotry begin with an internal phrase that goes something like, all those kinds of people are like this?
Well, I think with most of the bigots that I've met, I think it starts in their training, you know, from the time they were born, you know, what they've been exposed to growing up. I don't think people decide at the age of 24 or 25 to be a bigot. Yeah. I think it has a lot to do with, you know, how they were raised, what they were exposed to growing up. And, I mean, my first response is don't deal with them. I mean, why would you want to deal with them? Right. Now, I know sometimes we have to deal with them because, you know, we're related to them, or we work for them, or we work with them. So I realize sometimes we have to. I think sometimes it's important to just, you know, I have this little mantra inside my head sometimes when somebody's being that way or a different way, but still negative, and I just look at them and I go, oh, poor human being. They just don't know better, and walk away.
What would you say to somebody who came to you and said, you know, every time I see a fill in the blank, a Mexican person, a black person, a Muslim person, I get angry, I get afraid. Okay.
So in NLP, we call that a generalization, and it's it's a belief. Mm-hmm. So there's two ways to do that. One is to find counterexamples. Mm-hmm. So, you know, there may be, maybe they're bigoted against, you know, a particular race. Right. So if you know for a fact that there are people, you know, that they know in that race that, you know, are great people or have done something good for them even, right. You know, then you can point that out to break that generalization. But you have to also understand why they're doing that, because a lot of times when people act out, it's really because there's something missing inside. And, you know, they don't, either they're very insecure, so they have to be the boisterous, this is bad, all people are bad, and so that gives them some power, you know, and they don't have that inside, you know, that they're not confident enough with themselves that they can accept differences in others because they're very insecure. And that's not, I'm not saying all bigots are like that, I'm saying, but you really have to understand why someone's being a bigot. Sometimes it's just because it's in. You know, it's like, you know, they're around, everybody's like, yeah, we don't like that person. Yeah, how about you, Tom? You don't like that person either? Yeah, Tom don't like that person either. And it gets out of control. But sometimes it's just because they were taught that way. They didn't know anything better. So, you know, we really have to find out what is the point for this person to be that way. And then there's different approaches. I mean, if it's just a generalization, it's just a belief they built, then we have to either work with a counterexample or we blow it up to where it's ridiculous. So you don't like black chairs either, and you don't like, something else, and so why are you wearing shoes? So you make it ridiculous because somebody says a particular race or color they don't like. So you make it ridiculous.
Fascinating stuff. Fascinating stuff. Kathleen Laval is with us, taking your calls and talking with me as well. I'm enjoying the conversation. We'll be back.
I'm having fun too.
Me too. We'll be back with more of Kathleen Laval right after this. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be right back. Stick around. And welcome back. Marta in Big Bear Lake, California, I'm assuming, watching us on Free Speech TV. Marta, you're on the air with Kathleen.
Well, this is fascinating, and I've been suggesting at my local Democratic club, thanks to Thom Hartmann suggesting that we get involved in helping to, helping to make our Democratic clubs more effective. And I'm suggesting that we talk about small business, small farmers, economic growth, and not just attack Trump or talk about economic inequality, but to say we are the party of small business and small farmers and jobs, 21st century economy. So when I hear you talking about matching and, using the buzzwords, I think it's more than buzzwords. I think the Democratic Party should be the party of small business and small farmers and economic growth. And so, I wonder if that kind of talks about, or is, maybe you could comment on whether that's a way of matching.
Fascinating question. Your thoughts?
Well, I think everyone should be the party of small businesses and small farmers. And
I actually often, forgive my interrupting, but I actually often say to people, hey, if you're like my dad's Republican Party, and my dad was an Eisenhower Republican, and if you feel more comfortable in the Republican Party, get inside it. We need people of goodwill in both parties.
We do. We need people of goodwill. And with I just want to make one statement about the buzzword thing. I mean, it's more than just buzzwords. These are criterias that really trigger the brain. It's almost like if somebody loves skiing and you say anything about skiing in a conversation, they'll come across the room and go, "Oh, are we talking about skiing?" So it's not just a buzzword, but these are the words that trigger a particular state. Particular endorphins or serotonin, things are released in the brain. If you love skiing and somebody says the word skiing, it's like your brain just lights up. You almost lose track of what you're doing in the moment because did I hear skiing? So these are the kind of value words that are so important, and they're chunked up high enough that whether you're a Democrat or Republican or independent or whatever you are, if you chunk up a word high enough, I mean, you and I can have a complete disagreement. And if we chunk up high enough, maybe even to the level of existence, do you want to exist? I want to exist. You can always find a common ground. So we may not agree on the amount of taxes we should pay, but we're going to agree on the fact that we want people to be safe, warm, dry, full, have a happy life. We can always chunk up to that point. Right. Once we have that match, now we can begin to work down to the details, but at least we're working on those disagreement details with good feelings and good brain juice.
Right. So we start out with that. That's
you have to chunk up to it and then come down.
Yeah, we only have 1 minute to the break, so I want to get to Fred's call in a minute, but I don't think it's enough time to.
Okay.
So just this whole idea of buzzwords, there's this kind of magical thinking I think in both parties that if we just throw this out, everything will be or everybody will be changed.
People get so overused with it. It's just this whole thing of, oh, yeah, they're talking about this. It's actions that really counts.
Yeah.
It's not just the buzzwords.
Yeah. Don't listen to what they say, watch what they do. That too. Okay, we'll be back with Kathleen Laval. Stick around. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair, the X-Chair office chair. xchairthom.com is the website, xchairthom.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beats. More information is available over at thomsbeets.com, thomsbeets.com, or by calling 800-568-9889.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Cameron Hughes scours the world looking for the finest wines. You can get more information about Cameron Hughes and his wines at chwine.com/Thom, Thom. Here, Kathleen Laval is with us. She is a master trainer in neurolinguistic programming and design human engineering, DAG, and program director of NLP Seminars Group International. The website is purenlp.com.
Yes.
And Fred in Bremerton, Washington. Fred, you have a question for Kathleen?
Yes, I do. I first want to know the acronym is what now? The letters. The
N is for N is for neuro, which means the brain.
Okay.
L is for linguistics, which is the language we use outside and inside when we talk to ourselves. And P is for programming, which has to do with the sequencing of information in the brain, how we sequence information.
Excellent. Okay. As far as the linguistics and the programming, I find myself wanting to engage with other people, but within 30 seconds to a minute after engaging with them, I find out that the conversation isn't going the way I want it to, and I'm not getting my point across, and then I become disinterested in it because I'm not getting any kind of feedback. It's very difficult for me personally to engage with people one-on-one when I have so many sources of information I can go to as far as a computer. So why bother?
Okay. Well, I mean, certainly there's tons of information that's out there, and the more technology has boomed, it seems the less and less we're dealing with the individual
Would you like to engage Fred about
relationship? That? Absolutely. Fred, I think one of the things that you can do is to go back to what we talked about earlier about rapport. So when you first enter the conversation, notice how fast or how slow someone is talking. Notice how they're standing. Maybe stand very similar. You don't have to ape them or mimic them. That would be a little weird. But you can just kind of, if they're kind of leaning on the wall, if you're standing in somewhere, then, you can just sort of move in that direction without, completely mimicking what they're doing. And also notice how they're breathing. So at least you have a little bit of comfort and you feel comfortable, they feel comfortable with you. If you're talking very slow and they're talking very fast, they may not want to stop and listen to what you're saying or even answer your questions because it's just too slow for them. Or maybe you're faster and they're slower and they cannot understand. Because the thing that we know about the brain is that the rate of speech that people speak is usually about the same rate that they take in information in their brain. So if you're talking faster than they're talking, they're not able to catch all the information and vice versa. So now you have the rapport piece aside, you also sometimes want to get to the point quick. In marketing and sales and all the things that we teach, we always say you have to start with a why. Why is it worth it for me right now to spend some time with you? You don't have to say that as a marketing pitch, but think about it. You say, start off with, what is it that you want to know from this person? I respect that you have this much information, and this is what I'm interested in learning from you. Can we chat for a few minutes? Do you have a minute? I'd love to ask you about this. So that at least there's a frame to the conversation. If you just walk up and go, hey, nice shoes, it's a nice day outside, and and you kind of beat around the bush to get to what you're looking for, they may get tired or bored with that, or may just drift off into some other conversation.
Fred, does this make sense to you? You said you find yourself talking to people and then discover that
it gets to a point where the routineness of the conversation gets in the way, and I'm not really taking it anywhere else where I would think it would be something exciting to engage with this other person with. Say, I'm a hobby beekeeper. I want to talk to this guy about hobby beekeeping. He wants to go off on the politics of it, and I don't want to go back off on it. So I'm trying to find a way to back myself away from that conversation and redirect it. And I don't think I have the tools available because I'm not very good at that.
Well, first I want to say thank you. First, I want to say thank you for being a hobby beekeeper, because we definitely need to take care of the bees, and so thank you for doing that as a hobby. I think that it's important that, you know, if a conversation isn't going the way you want it, then take charge. And, you know, if they go off on politics or whatever and go, hey, I'm a beekeeper, you know, I'm busy, just like my bees, so I'm going to go do something else. Or, you know, unless you want to talk about something other than politics, I'm going back to my bees. I mean, it's okay to use a little humor and lighten up on things. You don't have to sit there and let somebody drone on about politics if that's not what you want to talk about. If there's something you need from them, you know, you're there for a particular piece of information you want from them, and just say, that's great. I'm good to see that you're passionate about politics. And can I simply have the answer to my question?
Remarkable stuff. Kathleen, thanks so much for being with us today.
You're welcome. It was a lot of fun.
Great having you here.
Thank you. Thank everyone for listening.
Indeed. Kathleen Laval, a company is NLP Seminar Group International and the Society of NLP, purenlp.com. I'll be back on Monday. Jefferson Smith will be with you tomorrow for Anything Goes Friday, and back to politics, and Jefferson is real good at that. You're going to have a lot of fun. So have a great day, and don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us, and that includes you. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. I'll see you soon.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
Cameron Hughes scours the world looking for the finest wines. You can get more information about Cameron Hughes and his wines at chwine.com/Thom, Thom.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. More information is available over at thomsbeets.com, THOMSBEETS.com, or by calling 800-568-9889. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by XChair, the XChair chair, office chair. XChairTom.com is the website, XChairTHOM.com.